Small bubbles rose in a flask with a medicine upward. Near the life support monitor, there was a vase with wilted flowers, meaning that no one had been to the patient for a long time. The mask lying in the hospital bed was wearing a mask that gave him oxygen. From the buds of flowers that were in a vase near the bed, several petals showered. One of the petals swaying in the air touched the face of a patient who was unconscious. Suddenly, the touch of the leaf returned Shenya to life, that for the first time in a long time he opened his eyes. Having risen, the patient immediately took off his mask, deeply sighing his chest. It took the guy some time to recover, not to mention realizing what happened, and only then Ching, which was within the walls of the hospital, decided that he was reborn. However, something did not give a guy to a peace who wary raised a sheet thrown over him. With a sharp movement, pulling it away, the patient was horrified when he discovered that his legs were amputated. For worried Sheeny, it was important to find out the exact time specifically at this very moment. Suddenly, the guy's thoughts were interrupted by the girl who entered the ward that she called him a brother. The tone was so glad that her brother finally woke up that she had already walled. In a fit of joy, the girl rushed into the embrace of Shenya, not stopping talking about how happy she was. The sister repeated that together with their brother they would certainly find the guilty driver and cure the young man's feet. Having acquired the girl, the cripple thought about the fact that since the incident has passed for a whole year, it was then that the young billionaire of the chairman of the International Rising Sun was shot down by a car. Ching's personal assistant immediately ran up to him, while passers-by demanded to call an ambulance. After that accident, the Shen was chained to a wheelchair, losing his feet. All the means possessed by the guy went to his treatment. But it was not the worst. At first, the crippled billionaire was glad to see his old friend Xiao Kutatsai. The guy brought the victim to the fruit with the fruit so that his comrade would recover as soon as possible. Xiao, which was always friendly, took the opportunity to seize all power in the company. Among other things, Tiansai threatened his sister Ching, telling her to marry him otherwise. He would cease to financially help the crippled brother. The guy claimed that if a girl promises to engage with him, then her brother would be safe. The helpless Sen could only scream at his ex-friend, demanding that he leave his sister. He lost all. The billionaire desperately tried to save his sister, even tears from a hospital bed to stop Xiao. A former friend, having captured a comrade company, now took away the person close to him. The Tone, looking plaintively at her brother, asked him for help, unable to restrain the tears of bitterness. Also sobbing from helplessness, Shenqing looked at the Tianu, who took everything in his world. At this time, the Divine Way game appeared, which was distinguished by complete realism, and the currency earned in it could be exchanged for real money. However, the main feature of the game was that the attributes of the character could influence real life. It was a great opportunity for Shenqing to change his own fate, but at that time, he did not have a penny. Without money, the guy could not get good resources and advance around the game, defeating the monsters. The cripple did not have the opportunity to compete with other players, not to mention his main enemy. Thanks to the money of Shenya, Xiao invested all the money in the game, and having received the best resources, became incredibly powerful in real life. Watching the statue of his opponent, the cripple convinced himself that all this should belong to him. This one thought was enough for a guy who lost everything, went crazy. Tian Sai found funny that he had to spend his time to see the dog Konora. The guy asked the cripple, did he think that the room clogged with explosives was able to kill him? Bowing to his enemy, who was distraught by the grief, Ching said that he wanted to make sure of this. The cripple, with the words that was ready to die only with Xiao, clamped the detonator button, activating the explosive charge. A thundering explosion that destroyed the apartment in which Shen lived echoed around the district. Being in the ruins, a former billionaire who lost his legs now has lost his whole body. Shenya, who almost lost consciousness, brought his voice familiar to him. The fact that the guy discovered, while at death, made him return to life. Bending over what was left of crippled, Tiansai explained that with the force received in the Divine Way, explosives were not afraid of him. Stepping on the wounded guy, his sworn enemy wanted to tell him something in the end. She revealed the secret that he was to blame for the death of Qing's parents, and in the absence of his legs, and the last person from the genus of Shen would bear his last name. With tears in his eyes, the guy watched his former friend laugh in full throat. Shenqing did not want to put up with such a fate, but could not do anything when Xiao stepped on his head. The guy had a rare chance to degenerate, returning back to his body a year ago. Calming his sister, Shen repeated so that she would not cry because everything was in order with him. This time, the guy wanted to make every effort to protect his sister and parents. At the same time, the embittered cripple wanted to tear to the shreds of the Xiao Kutsai who betrayed him. However, one desire was not enough, because the billionaire was still disabled. The only way to fix was the game that was at the launch stage, and people will learn about its influence only a month later. The sister, watching a gloom of grimace on her brother's face, decided that he suddenly hurt. The girl rushed to the reception room to call a doctor, but Ching stopped her, who had one request for her sister. This behavior of the patient surprised the relative that, despite this, was ready to fulfill any assignment. The guy wanted the tone to help him with the purchase of a game module for the Divine Path. Such a request dumbfounded the girl that she did not understand why her brother needed a game module. At that moment, Xiao entered the ward, who was also interested in what time did Chinu like the games. The comrade asked the crippled what would happen to his company if her boss would be given to the games all the time. Shen, now knowing who his friend really was, guessed that he was trying to get him out of himself. The guy stated that he was now crippled now, and that he had nothing more to do except playing games. Tianxai also knew about the game, enlightening a comrade that she went out only today in a limited quantity. Xiao suggested that he would have to buy the game from the resellers, but the company's money still belonged to Qin. Clean to the hospital bed, he repeated that he would buy the game even if it costs him 30 billion. The sister was against the purchase, but comrade Shenya promised that he would receive his toy. For the trader, buying a game module was on hand, which will facilitate the transfer of rights to management of the company. Comrade Qing assured him that he would get the game module, and together with the tone, take care of the company. Suddenly, the cripple, grabbing his sister by the hand, pulled her to him, which Tianxai was very surprised. The billionaire firmly stated that the tone would spend this night with him in this ward. Looking with a predatory look, the guy thought that his opponent would receive his sister only through his corpse. The behavior of the head of the company brought Xiao to be confused that he did not object to such a decision. The guy hastened to leave the ward so that his brother and sister could calmly talk. True, Tianxai was in no hurry, which finally decided to look again at the wounded comrade. The trader burst out from the incompetence of the driver, which allowed Shen to survive after the accident. Returning to himself, the guy decided that next time he would use the larger car. The cripple asked his sister to transfer all his money into the game, as well as sell all the shares of the company. Such a strange decision of his brother prompted the idea that these were the consequences of an accident. When asked if everything was in order with him, the guy replied that despite the injury he felt excellent. After that, the cripple added that he was going to make the largest bet in his life. 3 hours later, the guy sat inside the game module that he cost him 500 million. The billionaire all the condition that he had in his game, which he had already played in his last life. But the determination of Shenqing was so large that, despite anything, he plunged into the divine path. Having activated his avatar in the game, the guy moved to her world again, losing his legs. Having landed, Shen was incredibly glad that he could finally move freely. But before you start the game itself, the guy should give a name to his character. The cripple, a little thought out a little, decided to give his virtual version the name of Chao Chu Van. The player of the Divine Way needed to choose his class among the presented. Among all the options, the guy could choose from a warrior, a magician, a hunter, an assassin, a priest, a knight, and a calist. Without thinking twice, Qing decided to choose a class that he used in games earlier. The choice of Shini fell on a hunter, when choosing which his eyes flashed like a predator. Chao Chuvan was equipped with appropriate uniforms, and also issued weapons in the form of a bow and arrows. The guy, whose face did not slip, examining his vestments, could not get enough of him. Since Shen was a premium user of the game module, he received the Blood of Elves as a reward. The epic effect gave increased skills such as strength, dexterity, evasion, and critical blows, increasing their value by 10%. Also, in addition to this, because of his status, Qing received a book of skills as a special reward. The guy was incredibly lucky to get such awards at the very beginning that it will simplify the receipt of valuable resources. But the acquisition of skills did not end there even, and the neck in the appendage to everything became the owner of the treasure chest. If the player perceived previous awards calmly, then an exclusive gift was able to surprise him. The guy was eager to open the chest, believing that something important should have been stored in him. As soon as the player touched him, the message crawled out that to open the award needed to replenish the score for 50 million gold coins. King was surprised, since the amount declared by the game in real life was equal to 500 million yuan. For some time, the guy seriously thought, since the amount was not small, but in the end, he decided to replenish the score. Because if he did not spend money now, he would give the opportunity to pick them up. The next in line was the choice of talent, and the sooner the player entered the game, the higher the chance to get the best talent. In a past life, Shen received the effect of damage from bleeding. which helped him in many battles. This time, the guy intended to spend money in a large way, not sorry for a drop of his money. After replenishing the balance of 50 million gold coins, the chest opened. The player could not believe to the last that he had a skill to develop absolutely everything. A similar talent gave Kina not any kind of superiority to other players. From the beginning, the guy did not understand what he received for the skill, spending such an amount of money on him. Then Shen decided to open the details of talent to find out as much as possible about him. He was very surprised to learn that he got a passive and autonomous evolution, that they gave a chance to improve and increase the rank of a resulting object. Without doubting for a second, the player closed the information window, taking his talent. The destroyed window with information began to transform into an object on the arm of Shenya. The billionaire repeated that with the help of this ability to change the course of the game, while other players will only start their development, he will already have such an incredible skill. Without taking his eyes off the artifact, the guy stated that from now on, no one in the game could compare with him. Shini was eager to check the power of the skill on the fallen objects from the first monster he killed. But taking advantage of the ability, Qing discovered that reloading at the legendary object took a whole day. To start the game, Sheni had to find something worthwhile, in return for the equipment obtained. After the player finished with the preparation, he was ready to move on. The next step was the direct entry into the world of the Divine Way itself. When Qing pressed the corresponding button, a giant portal opened in front of him. The cripple was eager to change his fate that he again headed for the gates familiar to him. The guy, as in a last life, fell into the game through the portal that he transferred him to the starting location. Shen found himself in the village of Novichkov, in which there were already more than 24 other players. The guy was disappointed, because he believed that there would be among the first people who entered the game. But even more arrived in the game was surprised when he saw the characters that they wanted to take the experience from an ordinary rooster. Other participants in the game were shocked that the murder of such an animal also gave the player experience. After that, 2 strangers immediately followed the players who pursued the rooster. Sina wanted to believe that a crowd of his rivals hunted a bird not seriously, but the guy did not spend his time on them, because I already knew what to pay attention to first. Leaving the rivals with the bird, Shen went away from them to develop his character alone. The player intended to defeat the boss of the newcomer's zone, as well as get a reward for his first murder. The guy discarded the warning about the zone of wild monsters, for which the murder of them will bring additional awards to the character. As if strongly, Qing was in no hurry, but still opened the inventory to prepare before the fight. The billionaire discovered that although he spent a fortune, he had a meager arsenal. In the inventory, he had only 2 objects, namely a beginner's bow and standard armor. The player understood that in the proposed subjects there was no value that he could not pump. The guy began to think that using the ability to develop on such equipment was stupid. Suddenly, Qing dawned on when an incredible idea came into his head, which he hastened to embody. Shen still called on a unique equipment of his skill, but for another purpose. The guy leaned his hand with the object to his chest to apply the power of the artifact on himself. After that, the player took advantage of the passive evolution, showing the elven pedigree. The rules of the game were not forbidden to apply the effects of objects to the characters. Transformation succumbed to every section of the character of Qing, starting with his head, after which the changes continued with the player's limbs, strengthening the fingers and legs. Ultimately, the evolution was successful, and the character of Shenya received the advantage of the genealogy King of the Elves. Among the improvements was increased strength, an increase in vitality, as well as a guaranteed critical blow of each 3rd attack. Observing the increase in his indicators, the guy was glad that the skill gained himself justified. King was convinced that he would be able to cope with monsters alone with such attributes. Suddenly, a piercing howl came to the hunter that scared away all the birds in the district. The player was slightly strained when he heard in the vicinity of howls belonging to the wolf. The forest beast that the players of the Divine Way faced was the 2nd level. One of the participants in the detachment asked the predator. He really hoped to cope with them. The players wanted to get rid of the predator as soon as possible, because after his death they would immediately increase their level. Behind the collision of players and the monster sneakily watched the Sheena because of the tree. The guy noted that the game participants made a smart move, as the team murder increased the amount of experience and objects. However, despite the ingenuity of the detachment, there was clearly not enough knowledge of survival in this world. The team member found out about this, noticing 2 more opponents nearby. The girl carefully turned to her colleagues so as not to attract excess attention of animals. The sorceress said that they were surrounded, because the team did not occur to that the wolves attacked the prey of a pack. Predators, grinning their mouths, all as one pounced on the trap of hunters. Players, although they will not die for real, but shouted greatly with pain because the resulting animal bites were not inferior to real ones. One of the team members has already reconciled with his fate, so he did not even resist. Hung with wolves, the guy, turning to his comrades, said that he would see them at the point of resurrection. The animals did not even realize that the animals enjoying newcomers that they were preparing an attempt at that moment. Around the support of the elven genealogy, the hunter was going to attack the wolves. Having waited the most suitable moment, the Shen shot in a vulnerable enemy. The arrow released by him pierced the head of one of the predators, instantly killing the enemy. In such an elegant way, Qing committed his first murder as a hunter Chao Chu Vanya. The murder of the forest beast raised the guy to the second level, who received an additional 100 points of health and 10 points of magic. To everything else, the player received a wolf meat, which gave its owner continuous regeneration. From his experience, Shen understood that healing items were important for the game. But while the hunter was busy studying the achievements, the flock drew attention to him. Having checked his relative, one of the wolves became furious when he found him dead. Fortunately, because of the growl, the player found enemy in time. The remaining participants of the pack headed for the guy that they wanted to avenge him for the death of the murdered wolf. After the Shen checked the damage he should have focused on other skills. The hunter did not fight with a flock of forest wolves, and after he removed the weapon, turned around. Having accepted the chin rack, I wanted to try the improved effect of the speed granted to him by the genealogy king of the elves. Only the predators ran to the player, as he rushed off from them in the blink of an eye, developing no speed. With extraordinary ease, Shani managed to break away from his pursuers. The guy did not cease to rejoice that he increased not only damage, but also the speed, which was incredibly important for the archer. The guy, having ceased to hear the barking wolves behind him, considering that the animals could not compete with him in speed, having decided to check at what distance his pursuers were, the hunter was very surprised. Without finding a flock of wolves behind him, the player stopped running, sharply slowing down. Watching the predators remaining in the shade of trees, the guy could not understand why the animals stopped chasing him. The wolves continued to grimace, sparkling viciously, but did not move from a place either to a centimeter. Only looking at the notification that arose next to him, the hunter became clear. He got into the bison area. It was a zone with a higher level monsters. Defended, forest wolves were forced to retreat, leaving the target they hunted. Shanu's thoughts that monsters of the 5th level lived in this area was interrupted by a stranger. The girl in the company of 2 guys invited the hunter to join their team. She said that their detachment was preparing to hunt bison, becoming the first to reach this area from the moment the server was opened. The guy in the hat that was a magician objected, not wanting to take anyone to the team because the guy had only the 2nd level. Such a statement brought Qing into bewilderment, considering the player's arrogant. The hunter told the detachment that he was to head to another place, which greatly surprised the hunters. It seemed to the swordsman that the guy, desperate to such an act, was not at his mind. Shen repeated that he was more comfortable for him, who was also not going to always hunt for small monsters. The team began to dissuade the hunter, asking if he knew what would happen in case of his death. Having pretended to be a newcomer who never died, Qing asked strangers to tell him about it. The swordsman explained that after the revival, the character lost all his skills and all weapons. The man claimed that the player feels all the pain and despair on himself in life, because his experiences will be cut off. But despite all the horrors that the team participant told, the billionaire did not respond to them. Leaving a detachment of strangers in even greater bewilderment, Qing said goodbye to them, continuing his way. The girl tried again to persuade her comrades to take the stranger to the team, but they were still against it. The wizard believed that if a beginner wanted to die, then he would not bother him. After long wandering, the loner finally got to the place he needed. Having picked up the skull from the floor, the hunter examined him and became convinced that he had come where he should. Throwing the skeleton's head to many others, Shen said that he would die today in a cave of a huge boss for beginners. However, the skull fell at all there, hitting the monster living in the cave. The creature revealed his eye in order to find out who dared to disturb his peace. It turned out that the owner of this cave all this time slept under the mountain of skulls of his victims. Straighten, a huge snake with blood-red eyes, towered in front of the hunter. The player activated the skill of identifying weaknesses that, watching the monster, immediately scanned him. The giant king of the snakes, which was a 10th level, had a weak place the back of the neck. Because of the blood of the king of the elves, Shen received an additional 1,000 health, whose indicator exceeded the health of the enemy. The guy called his weapon, which had an advantage over the snake, did not be afraid of him. Having aimed, the hunter was sure that the damage of his arrows would be enough to defeat the monster. However, the royal snake did not wait until he shot him and counterattacked the player. Having basic skills, Qing would never have dodged the enemy's attack, but not this time. The enemy did not expect that the player would be so dexterous and hit the ground, opening his weak place for him. But the arrow, released into the snake, took away from him only 29 units of health. Unfortunately, the novice attack power was still low, which greatly complicated the battle. The only thing that saved the player from monster attacks was his pumped dexterity. Each blow to his tail beat the target. As he did not have time for a quick hunter, Shen was sure that he could easily score such a slow enemy to death. However, the monster, although he lost to the guy in speed, did not forget to cover the back of his neck. Qing did not expect that the snakes would protect its weak place, complicating the already difficult task. The hunter decided to check who was faster, the tail of the snake or his arrow, because his speed also increased. The first from the series of arrows released by Shenem did not inflict any damage to the enemy. Exactly such a result was expected by the second arrow, significantly reducing the chances of success. But the third arrow managed to get to the weak place of the monster, reducing health by 58 units. Shen mentally celebrated the victory, watching how the snake could not block each of the arrows. But the guy relaxed ahead of time, finding which monster prepared a response for him. Sparkling with fiery eyes, the creature began to spray translucent smoke along the cave. In a matter of seconds, Qing disappeared behind the wall of smoke, which tirelessly fell from the jaws of the predator. And only when the mysterious fog got to the player's face, he realized that it was a poison that took away 10 points of health every second. The hunter was puzzled, because he will have to start at this pace all the whole time after 2 minutes of battle. Meanwhile, the enemy climbed up to increase the distance between him and Shenem. The monster deliberately waited for the guy to weaken to attack him. But even being in such a seemingly hopeless situation, Shen laughed in the face of death. The player repeated that the snakes underestimated his abilities, preparing for another attack. The hunter released another arrow that the poisonous fog overdosed by the flame. The monster was shocked by the enemy's hit, which inflicted more than 100 damage points for him. The inhabitant of the cave immediately collapsed to the floor, because the damage inflicted by the guy was too large. Every third attack of the player could apply an enemy a critical blow, which the monster, of course, did not know. Although the monster's eyes continued to burn, the former brilliance in them was no longer observed. Shen was sure that he would be enough for him to deal with the boss for beginners for 2 minutes. The player's health continued to contract inexorably, but the snakes still survived. The guy could not believe that the monster managed to adapt to the position in which it turned out. The enemy of Qing changed his tactics and made the guy move throughout the cave, reducing the number of his attacks. The snake began to wave his tail so that the hunter did not have the opportunity to inflict critical blows. However, as before, the hunter dodged each of the attacks thanks to his dexterity. Bowing a snake from the next attack, the player believed that he overestimated himself, if this was his entire plan. Shan in the flight pulled the bowstring, preparing for another critical shot. Even considering the position in which the hunter was, he still managed to shoot exactly at the target. The Qing arrow, having hit the enemy, inflicted a critical blow to him in the amount of 200 health units. The participant of the game wondered what exactly the increase in the damage he had inflicted. Without clogging his head with such thoughts, the guy firmly landed on the ground. Having aiming again on the monster, Shen thought only that he would be able to kill him much faster. But during aiming, the player for a moment froze from the picture he saw. The creeping monster, opening his mouth, depicted a kind of smile, chuckling softly. The monster, taking advantage of the moment, hit his tail straight into his enemy. However, the snake's blow was not aimed at the player, but to the area near him, which began to crack. Cracks spreading around the section of the cave around Shayna appeared under his feet. The next moment, the hunter in horror felt how the earth leaves under his feet. The billionaire, falling into the formed hole, now understood why the monster began to laugh at him. Despite the sudden attack that Sina found it by surprise, the guy calmly landed on the bottom of the pit. Looking at the snake remaining upstairs, the player repeated that the enemy not only prevented him from attacking, but also created collapse. The surprises for the beginner did not end there, and the monster attracted him with his new attack. The snake again sprayed the poison, which gradually began to flock into the hole he created. This time, the deadly fog applied 20 units of damage, which was fatal for the beginner. The hunter understood that he would not survive the battle, even if he doubled his health. Although he pulled out a wolf meat from the arsenal, Shen Yu was interested in what would fall out of the boss after his death, restoring his health in the meantime. The meat at least could not heal from poisoning, but allowed to neutralize the effect of health loss. In the next 20 seconds, the player raised his characteristics that they can solve the outcome of the duel. Even more rapidly than his arrows flew, Qing began to climb the walls of the pit. In a matter of seconds, due to an increase in speed, the hunter managed to get out of the trap. At this time upstairs, the enemy continuously blew out of himself a poisonous fog, filling them with everything around. Fascinated by his attack, the serpent did not even notice how Shen jumped out of the puffs of smoke with lightning speed. The guy attracted the attention of the monster, calling him out, in which the sharp tip of the arrow was already looking. Realizing that once again, not one of his attacks worked, the owner of the cave was dumb. The arrow released by Chinim unexpectedly hit the snake right into the eye, which the enemy clearly did not expect. The giant monster crashed to the ground with a roar, in the eye of which the enemy's arrow flaunted. The player witnessed how the monster tried to escape from the battlefield, feeling that she was losing. Being disagree with this outcome of events, the hunter released another arrow on the snake. The enemy, without understanding it, substituted himself under the blow, leaving Xianu his weak place. The shooting monster, the arrow managed not only to get into an unprotected place, but also to break through his defense. From such a painful blow, the owner of the cave turned to his enemy, expressing his contempt for him. But looking at the player, the monster quickly moved from an angry roar to plaintive moans. The guy was already ready to shoot, aiming at the opponent of the tip of the new arrow. With a clear, even line, the arrow landed straight into the weak place of the monster, forcing him to suffer. The arrow released by Shenem flew into the previous arrow, cutting it into two parts. Then she flew through, jumping out of the giant king of the snake from the open mouth. When Qing landed, his enemy was already dead, who had no more health units. Having destroyed the boss, the guy thereby removed the status of poisoning from his character. The game congratulated Shenya on the murder of the first boss on the server. I am interested in whether he will announce his achievement, or will hide his ID. Having thought a little, the guy decided to declare himself that he had hidden from everyone for so long. The hunter literally shouted that he did not agree to hide his identity on the board of glory. Immediately after this, information arose that Chao Zhuvan committed the murder of the boss of the King of Giant Snakes. Such a notification came to all players who were upset, as they just started playing. The news made some teams quarrel that accused each other of their indecision. Some participants regretted that they spent a lot of time when others were surprised by the fact that the character alone killed the boss. The incident did not bypass the detachment of the players who met with Shayna earlier. The swordsman, who dumped the Bison team forces, asked himself how this was possible. It was curious for beginners what a reward was for the first murder, falling on the fact that it could be high-class objects. Hunters amused themselves with the thought that they were professionals in the laying of girls. Looking at the participant of their detachment, the guys hoped to hear praise from her in their address. In front of the players, information windows appeared, with the information that interests them before. The newcomers felt like clowns, because Chao Zhuvan received 1,000 points of reputation and a silver chest for winning. Due to the fact that Shen killed an enemy of a higher level, he managed to increase his own from the second right to the 7th. The hunter received 30 points of attributes in addition, which decided to spend everything on dexterity. Increasing dexterity, assassins and hunters also increased the power of attack and evasion, which could not but rejoice Qing. Having finished pumping skills, the guy wanted to know what he had fallen from the murdered monster. Suddenly, the equipment of the legendary skill appeared on his hand, which used a passive evolution. The artifact increased the quality of the extracted objects, allowing you to turn silver coins into gold. The players massively began to complain that, having spent a lot of time in the game, they managed to get only copper coins, not to mention the silver coins. The resulting improvement, which made almost a magnate from Shenya, began to behave strangely. Looking at the golden radiance emanating from the artifact, the guy was at first wary. However, doubts disappeared because Qing decided that he provoked a second evolution. The hunter was in anticipation, because he still had to examine the objects that had fallen from the snake. The first was a crystal coin, a rare currency for which it was possible to purchase special items in the game. Shen never saw a crystal coin alive, but was sure that she would still come in handy. Taking a pleasant bonus, the player intended to take the resulting prey from the monster. Qing ordered to open the enemy inventory to look at his trophies. The first in the field of view was a one-handed sword called a silver snake that approached the class of a warrior and an assassin. For a hunter, such a weapon was useless, but it could always be sold for good money. But the second subject in the arsenal of the monster seemed much more attractive than the previous one. The armor of the azure scales, made of silver, added 200 of health units to its owner, as well as 300 bonus shield glasses at the beginning of the battle. According to the memoirs from a past life, the armor had no special effects, but in this case there was even a temporary shield. For this armor, the hunter needed the 10th level, but the player did not feel any improvements after the victory over the boss. For a while, the billionaire wondered how he should get out of this situation. Soon, Shenya dawned, recalling that the system gave him a valuable silver chest. After the player chose a reward in the inventory, she materialized right above his head. The guy ordered the system to open it, from which a bright light began to spread immediately. The hunter, looking at the chest, prayed only for one thing, so that there was no nonsense inside him. To the relief of Shini, a chain of 7-star arrows fell out of the chest, which was legendary skills. The player was very lucky, because for the archer this ability will be in handy. The only disadvantage was that for this skill, the 10th level was also needed. On the other hand, as soon as Qing reaches the desired level, it will instantly increase its damage. Suddenly, a voice came from the dark corner of the cave, asking someone to help him. Shen peered carefully from around the corner, because he did not trust anyone who could be in a cave with a monster. The girl asked for help, introducing herself like a Lady Gu, what was hiding here from a huge snake. Recalling that the stranger could be NPC, the guy said that he had dealt with the monster and she could go out. Lady Gu would happily leave the shelter, but injured her leg, showing the place of the bruise to the guy. Confused from her request, the girl still asked the hunter if he could take her in his arms. Also, baking down with paint, Shen thought for a moment before he gave an answer. As soon as they left the cave, the NPC thanked the guy for the help provided to her. Grateful to the player, Lady Gu reported that the next time she would take care of the guy. Qing did not immediately dawn that the girl was ready to thank him another time. From such a sudden statement, the player released the girl that painfully fell to the ground, having scratching the place that the NPC hit in the fall. She stated that she had no money with her. Instead, Lady Gu asked her savior how she could repay him. The guy with a frightening gaze leaned against the girl and said that he had nothing to need from her. The girl suddenly made such an answer of the player laugh, saying that the savior had discharged her. After that, the girl gave the hunter a dark lunar blade, which was perfect for an assassin. But instead of accepting the weapon, Shan waved his hand, because of which Madame Gu drops the blade. Leaning even closer to the NPC, the player demanded from her some attribute of a hidden class. The hunter, digging in his own memories, suggested that he could steal the daughter of Gu. Turning to the NPC, Shen said that he would find a girl by the name of Jiyu to receive the right item. The saved character of the game was shocked that the player somehow found out about his daughter. Even with reluctance, the girl still agreed to help Shenya to open a hidden class. The hunter was indignant at why it was impossible to immediately agree to help him in this matter. Then, Lady Jiyu raised her hands upwards by connecting her wrists and began to scroll them. After that, the girl began to dance slowly, lit by the sun's rays. The newly made assistant Qing spun in place, while the guy silently watched her actions. The final point of ritual dance was the moment when the girl raised her luxurious hair up, and the next second, under the hunter, a magic circle was formed, painted with various patterns. Jiyu explained that the player was waiting for a test, after which he could get a hidden class. Shane, pleased with the opportunity that had fallen to him, thanked the girl for his assistance, but she stated that the hunter was in no hurry to thank her, because he still did not know what expected him. Harding after the words NPC, the guy looked at the information window that appeared. The hunter's face was distorted in horror, finding that the test of the shadow hunter was at a crazy level of complexity. Shen, trying to get out of the magic circle, insisted that there was some kind of mistake here, because at such a level he could die. The girl replied that the player should not threaten her daughter, receiving from Mrs. Jiyu 0 points of favor. Unfortunately, the hunter later realized that he needed to show respect and win the location of the girl. But the portal was already open, in which the neck was bogged down almost to the waist, so the player had no way back. The girl also added the hunter, he will pass the test or not, depended only on his skills. Having practically falling into the portal, the guy again began to threaten the NPC, confident that he would definitely get out, and when he does it, he will certainly find the daughter of Gu, forcing the girl to regret her decision. The portal that opened the character of the game appeared in another world among the night sky. Due to his dexterity, Shan landed on the ground without any problems, almost crushing the little lizard. Looking around, Qing discovered that he had hit the deserted place, swallowing sand during landing. A window appeared near the guy again, recalling that an immediate disqualification followed the failure. The player immediately called his weapon, because he did not have the opportunity to make a single mistake. The attention of the hunter attracted an incomprehensible noise, which came from somewhere below. Gathering his gaze, the billionaire saw a mysterious fang that shone through the sand that glowed in pink. Suddenly, from all sides, he emerged from the guy's sand surrounded by the giant fangs of the monster. Only thanks to the pumped dexterity and speed, the player did not fall into the trap of the monster. Jumping up, Shen, watching the sandy worm, wondered if it was the main test boss. The hunter immediately activated the detection of weaknesses in order to know how to cope with an unknown enemy. The sandworm was a 5th level of monsters, the weakness of which was the center of his mouth. Although the level of the enemy was inferior to Shenya, it was not so easy to deal with such an enemy. The arrow released by the player inflicted 130 units of damage to the monster, going straight to the center of the mouth. Due to the fact that the worm was clumsy, Qing hoped that each of his arrow would hit the target right, allowing him to quickly cope with the enemy. Having erupted with a piercing cry, the monster left his shelter and soared to the sky, demonstrating his size. After that, the sandworm at great speed decided to attack a brave player. But the guy did not even think of leaving, because he was sure that he would be able to leave the frontal attack without any problems. The monster, with all his might, took his face into the sand, but missed and did not manage to swallow the enemy, hiding from the dust that had risen around the wall. The Shen noticed that there was enough one exact blow to that there was no trace of the enemy. The worm completely disappeared underground, and the hunter crept in, the thought that the monster deliberately missed. The guy again felt the movement underground, but the Klykov monster has not yet been observed. Shen immediately discovered the enemy's movement, but on the other hand, which made him be alert. The hunter noted that the enemy was too deep underground, and his movement was difficult to track. The monster was quite vague underground, and when it appears on the surface, Qing will have less than a second to react. The billionaire began to look around to find a place nearby, where he could minimize the square and not get into an ambush. I did not have to look for a long time, because right opposite the player there was a suitable place with a hill. It turned out to be a tall stone column on which incomprehensible hieroglyphs flaunted. Without thinking twice, Shen rushed to the saving place holding a bow with an arrow ready. The enemy was not visible anywhere, and it seemed that Qing would be able to get to the place without incident. The guy almost put his leg in the place from where the clickworm appeared from the sand. The hunter was surprised that by negligence, he almost fell into a trap organized by his enemy. Rushing aside with lightning speed, Shen prepared for a shot in a dared monster. This time, the guy released 2 arrows in a sandworm at once to increase the damage he inflicted on him. The attack was effective, because the 3rd blow inflicted critical damage to the enemy. Shen perfectly understood that his plan was not the most reliable, but at the same time, he had a chance to win. The monster decided to change tactics and used a sand spit, shooting sand from his mouth in one gulp. The hunter was not at a loss and covered his face with his hand, preventing himself from catching himself by surprise in the air. However, the spit turned out to be so strong that the player hardly managed to recapture him. And still, the remains of the sand that fell into the eyes of him took away 52 units of health from him. In the next 10 seconds, the vision and accuracy of the guy's attacks were reduced by half. Looking at his hand, the hunter found that the effect of blindness was very strong. The player wanted to get to the stone column as soon as possible, not suspecting the enemy from behind, and only the growing trembling of the earth made the guy pay attention to the enemy. Looking at the approaching threat with a blurry gaze, Shin managed to consider a worm in it. By some unimaginable miracle, the player left the monster's attack, deciding to move in the direction of the column. The shockwave caused by the enemy helped the hunter get to the destination. Qing mentally thanked the monster, which, by negligence, helped the enemy in the battle. Listening to what was happening, the guy found that the monster again went underground, which could become a problem for him. When the player sank to the ground, the blindness caused by the attack of the sandworm was removed. When Shen could again see, all that he needed was to understand the pattern of monster attacks. While the enemy has not yet appeared, the hunter came to the conclusion that it was time to counterattack. The guy screamed to call the monster to seem that he would accept his death with valor. The worm quickly responded to the request of Sheni, whose fangs seemed from the sand surrounded him. The billionaire was pleased that the enemy was not long in coming, obediently following his orders. The player did not understand. Did the monster really think that he could cope with him with the help of such monotonous attacks? The monster decided to repeat his well-made trick, again spitting out a clot of sand into the guy. Calmishly dodging the attack in the air, Qing, in response, released another arrow in the monster. The attack was made perfectly, and the worm once again received a damage to 260 points. The hunter calmly landed on the ground, not fearing that the enemy could attack him. The guy who was put to him. The guy asked the monster. Did his determination disappeared after a couple of injuries? Since the worm was not going to attack anymore, the player decided to finish him as soon as possible. He, having broken from the place of a bullet, headed straight to the mouth of a giant monster. Shen, dodging another attempt by the worm to blind him, released the arrow exactly to the center of his mouth. The arrow, as before, had caused damage to 130 units of health, not leaving the enemy of the slightest chance of victory. After that, Qing released one arrow after another, and every third doubled the force of attack. The monster, along with health, was gradually losing the opportunity to withstand the player. Looking back at the enemy's scale, the hunter calculated that his next blow would be decisive. The last neglected arrow finished off the worm, which was officially defeated by Chao Tzu Venem. In addition to copper coins that were improved to silver, the player received sandy shoes as a reward. He was wildly outraged by the object because he spent a lot of effort to destroy the monster. Qing was sincerely disappointed, and that if not for the glasses of experience, he would not even try to kill the worm. The guy was surprised when he saw that one of the symbols had caught fire on the column that was carved on her. Having examined it, the billionaire discovered that only one of the 8 characters was glowing. The hunter already guessed that the symbols could mean, but he wanted to make a strong mistake. The next moment, several sandworms attacked the player from the ground at once. Unfortunately, the guesses of the guy were true, and he needed to kill 7 more of the same enemies. Only having destroyed all the monsters to a single player will be able to pass this test. Shen jumping onto the column, he caught himself thinking that this place could have gone to pump the level. Inspecting the desert, the guy did not want to stay on the ground, because he could not cope with so many monsters at a time. The hunter began to think about how he would create vibrations from a safe distance in order to attract monsters. And then Tsina came to mind how to lure the monsters one at a time, so that it was easier to deal with them. Turning to the inventory, the guy took out 8 silver coins from him, as they were heavier than copper. After that, the hunter scattered the coin at the foot of the column at the top of which was, with a dull sound, silver money fell on the sandy earth, it seemed, not attracting any attention. However, this could only seem at first glance, because one of the worms still pecked at the bait. Having aimed at the monster, Shen praised himself that he managed to come up with an incredible battle strategy. But the ingenious plan of the hunter failed, because the released arrow managed to inflict only 35 units of damage to the enemy. The player was darkened because he could not predict the angle of inclination, which did not allow to get into a weak place. Such a miscalculation failed to strongly upset the hunter that he was going to take more coins. After 4 hours of exhausting shelling, the test was finally completed. Shen exhaled in relief when he killed the last worm, the murder of which was monotonous and boring. Surrounded by corpses of monsters, the hunter received a notification from the system about increasing the level. The guy did not even notice how he reached the 10th level, also increasing the scale of his health. Having checked the characteristics of his character, the player decided to assign all the received good glasses. As soon as Qing pumped good luck, the evasion and frequency of hits also increased by several values. The hunter did not know that luck would be much more useful than the dexterity that he developed before. Shen took advantage of passive evolution to check the renewed luck of the character. The magic object, aimed at the sandworm, was ready to get a reward from it. In a past life, the guy did not have the opportunity to pump damage and health. But now, pumping them, he lost sight of many other things. The player drew attention to the fact that the light emanating from the monster was purple. The hunter went out with a headlong head from the column, because below it was expected by the subject of the legendary rank. Running to the corpse of the monster, the guy resembled a child who was eager to get a gift at the festival. The awards turned out to be an escape from the sand, which allowed to freely move around the desert area, but also acted only there. Shenyu had the opportunity to study the skill of the worm, but he expected not at all the same ability. The hunter spent 10 silver coins studying the skill, which could be useful in the future. Having pumped up to the 10th level, the guy decided to study the skill of the 7-star arrow. After paying for the study, the hunter was also available this ability, which was a priority for him. Having received a notification of blue armor, the guy without hesitation equipped himself with it. Having received a significant increase in defense, Shen was convinced that he was a player of the highest level on the server. Having dealt with the awards, the guy expected further actions from the test. All the symbols on the column glowed, the sandworms were defeated, and the awards were collected. Only the player decided that nothing happened after completing the task, as the earth under his feet trembled. It turned out that a small earthquake was caused by the transformation of the column, which turned into a certain cave. Approaching the entrance of the dungeon, the hunter decided that the real reward for the test was inside him. Shen decided that now there was an ideal time to try out new skills and equipment. Suddenly, his sister's voice came to the billionaire, who tried to reach him. The guy tensed, because he did not expect to hear his voice, while he himself was in the game. Climbing the game module, the girl kept repeating that her brother had to be interrupted to eat. The sister prepared boiled eggs and porridge, but Qing was more worried about whether she accidentally climbed into the capsule. The guy demanded that the sister immediately get off the module, while the game asked if the player wanted to leave her. Shen refused to leave the divine path to the cut until he gets a hidden specialization. However, the Tone asked his brother to take a break because he was in the game about 8 hours. The guy shouted at her sister to stop poking him and would not interfere with the game. The girl, who hung at that moment upside down, began to slowly lose her patience. Leaving the porridge on the table, the Tone stated menacingly that she would no longer take care of her brother. But despite this statement, her sister reflected on how to help Tsina. Without knowing whether she heard him or not, Shen asked her sister forgiveness, because the girl did not know how important this game was for him. The girl needed only a little patience, and then her loving brother would become stronger. To get a Ghost Hunter class as a reward, the player went down to the portal inside the cave. Touching the portal, the guy felt the strongest energy, from which he had to cover himself. Harding Qing nevertheless dared to go inside, so as not to depreciate the time spent in the desert. Having moved, the hunter was in the cave, which reminded him of the one in which he defeated the snake. The notification warned of extreme danger, from which it could be concluded that a true boss was in this place. Suddenly, the gigantic claws of the monster, who lived in this cave, appeared from the ground. When the hunter saw the enemy in full height, he decided that the game of him simply mocked him. Before Sheena was a Sandy King, a crab of a gold level, from the special skills of which was a sandstone. Since the monster had 6,000 units of health, the player decided to scan it to weaknesses. But Qing was greatly surprised by the system, saying that this opponent was not detected by weakness. While the hunter was digesting the information received, the crab was already preparing to attack him. The guy hoped that the speed of such an enemy would not be fast, but at that very moment the crab struck the strongest blow. Despite the fact that Shen did not fall under the direct blow of the monster, he was hit by a shockwave. The hunter got well, because even the shockwave from the enemy attack caused him a lot of damage. The player was saved by the fact that the armor took the blow, because if the damage had been in health, then the feeling would be much worse. When the crab took his claw out of the ground, a huge hole formed at the site of the blow. Armed with a bow, the guy realized that he was simply not the best strategy to dodge the monster's attacks. The hunter released an arrow at the enemy, which removed only 1 unit from the health scale. In surprise, Qing opened his mouth that until the last, he did not believe that his attack was only 1 point of damage. Running off the battlefield, the guy decided that he had to use his advantage in speed. However, the gigantic monster claws in a matter of seconds reached the player. The hunter understood that at such a distance it would be difficult for him to dodge another attack. The monster brought down its limbs on the enemy, not giving him a single chance of salvation. But when the crab lifted his claw, then in the hole that was formed from the blow, he did not find the corpse of a hunter. Shen decided to cheat, and instead of defending or counterattack, jumped into the claw. The monster could not help but notice the enemy that he had climbed him. So he decided to get rid of the insolent. The boss of the dungeon, with a sharp movement of the claw, threw the guy from her that he went to the other end of the cave. Unfortunately for the hunter, the gigantic sizes of the crab did not prevent him from moving quickly. King was so angry with the enemy that he decided to use the recently acquired skill on it. Having released the 7-star arrows on the monster, the neck increased the damage to 60 points and to 120 at the time of critical strokes. The released arrows, passing through the armor, applied 1% of the maximum damage. But it was more important that the higher the enemy's health, the stronger the damage caused by arrows was. The Sandy King was angry with the trick of the hunter, and his answer, Qin did not force himself to wait long. The monster with his claws caused a rather severe damage to the player, subsequently deactivating his shield. The realization that Shen suffers a defeat in the battle with a crab opened a second wind in it. Ignoring the damage received from the shockwave, the guy climbed to the shell of the monster. The player wanted to teach the enemy, and therefore charged the bow for another attack by 7-star arrows. However, after the words said, nothing happened, which caused Qing bewilderment. It was enough for the hunter to raise his head in order to see that he did not have enough mana to perform an attack. Sheeny needed to wait to restore Manu, since his stock was not enough even for 2 shots. The monster suddenly jumped up, which was a surprise to his opponent. Looking up, the guy decided that the crab in this way tried to throw him to the ceiling. Despite the pumped luck, Shen did not want to test it and jumped off the monster. While the young billionaire successfully landed on the ground, his enemy crashed into the ceiling of the cave. Storing in the ceiling, the Sandy King gave the enemy to find his weak place. Hearing a signal about detection, Qing decided to check where it came from a crab. A weak place turned out to be a belly, which until that moment the enemy successfully hid. It became clear to the player why he could not find him before, suggesting that luck still worked properly. However, the belly open for attacks of the Sand Kings suddenly began to spark with lightning. The system notified the danger, applying 100 damage points per second, lasting 1 minute. Mysterious vortices began to form around the guy, which was the work of his enemy. Shen was unhappy that the monster had such a skill, interested in how much more his action would continue. The wind created by whirlwinds was so strong that the guy could not take an extra step. The hunter thought that if everything continues to continue, he will soon receive damage in 6,000 units. The Sandy King with his whirlwinds drove the hunter into the trap, without ceasing to apply him every second. Vortexes were so forced that Qing could not stand anymore, whose legs began to be touched. Raising his head, the guy through a strong wind still managed to consider the belly of the monster. Assuming that it was with him that the monster created a tornado, the hunter shot in a weak place and fell thanks to critical talent. After Shen wounded the monster, he began to wait if the enemy would weaken his attack. The veins raised all over the belly, but at the same time lightning was also intensified. Shen hoped that the attack of the monster would weaken, but the tornadoes began to spin faster. Immobilized airstreams the guy continued to endure, ready to get even with the enemy as soon as the time came. A few minutes later, the attack of the Sand King ended, but Qing disappeared with it. The test boss noticed how one piece of land with a small slide was barely noticeable. Suddenly leaving his shelter, Qing attacked the monster in the belly, aiming at a weak place. Amazing the enemy, the hunter asked him if he was surprised by his appearance. The crab became more angry than before, reactivating the airstorm, but Shen was ready for a repeated attack, which in turn applied the skill of escaping from the sands. While a whole crowd of tornadoes raged on the surface, the player dived underground. Having emerged from the ground, like sandworms, the guy suddenly attacked the enemy. Arrows, hitting exactly the target, forced the monster to interrupt the storm activated by him. The player, being directly over his opponent, expected his further actions. The next moment, the creature collapsed heavily from the ceiling to the ground, deciding to fight in close combat. The crab brought his gigantic claw, the sharp end of which sparkled brightly in the darkness of the cave. The monster hit the ground, but his opponent was no longer at the place of the blow that again went underground. The guy stuck his head and called a giant monster, attracting attention. The enemy began to beat the earth with quick movements, in the hope that at least one blow would fall on the hunter. Qing jumped out then by inflicting a small damage to the monster there. But his skill did not require reloading, allowing him to turn such a trick many times. Another plus that Shini liked was that he did not spend the mana of his character. Suddenly, the giant angry monster swore dirtily against his enemy. After 3 hours of exhausting battle, the hunter lost 2/3 of his health. Fortunately, the mana scale was filled so much that the guy could use the 7 prostrate arrow. The player told the enemy that if he did not move, he would strike first. Unexpectedly for himself, Qing heard a sandy crab said that he was going to give up. Drinking his tears, the monster repeated that for him it was too painful, wanting the hunter to kill him. The guy decided to take pity on the poor creation, explaining that the problem was in his high protection. After these words, Qing released the 7-star arrows straight into the abdomen of the monster. Shen raised his level to the 13th, confident that he was the first to achieve such successes in the game. The system proposed changing the class to a ghostly hunter, which the player was happy to. As soon as the guy chose a change in the classification, his transformation immediately began. The changes also affected the patron of Qing of the Elven King, who began to be covered with dark spots. From now on, when switching to the class of a ghostly hunter, a dark elf will patronize the guy. The player was delighted when he found out that with an increase in the level, attributes glasses would also increase. With the new class, the hunter also received the call of the phantom that for 30 seconds will fight on the side of its owner. In addition, the deadly trap was also available, which was invisible to everyone except its owner, but was ineffectively against large enemies. Studying new abilities, Shen believed that although the skills were average in strength, they would become extremely powerful after a while. The guy thought what would happen if you combine the damage from the trap with the call of the phantom. The passive evolution was completed by this time, and Qing agreed to the opinion that it was a profitable decision to increase good luck. Having directed the item on a sand crab, the player watched with interest what would fall out of it. 30 gold and silver coins were obtained from the monster, as well as 2 precious stones. The hunter ordered the game to open the enemy inventory to receive the awards laid down to him. The guy could not restrain his joy when he received an armor-piercing silver bow that reduced the enemy's defense with each attack by 5 points. The player's equipment also received the update, which changed simple gloves to steel, adding glasses to dexterity and attack strength. Among all the awards, there was also a golden two-handed sword, whose waves released energy, causing severe damage to the enemy. Shen appreciated the weapon, but temporarily could not use it, and it was a pity to sell it. Among the awards was the Amulet of Life, restoring 10 units of health per second, which immediately ended up on the neck of Qing. The player decided to add the remaining retained points to the dexterity column. Suddenly, the system informed the guy that he would be withdrawn from the game, because he played for more than 15 hours in a row. Sheen began to protest, claiming that he could have been in the game as much time. However, everything that he said did not make sense, since the system automatically threw him out of the game. The billionaire clung to the opportunity to continue the game, but has already moved to the real world. Finding himself inside the game module, the guy was silent for a while, trying to digest what had happened. King wondered what other deactivation of the system was talking about, which in the past times it never happened to it. True, the player quickly reconciled with the rules of the game module because everything went well with him. The memories of people who caused him many troubles in the past suddenly surged over him. Shen vowed, which would make Xiao Kutu cut and all the others to pay for the deed. Returning to his ward, the cripple found that his sister had spent all this time here. Touching the porridge, the guy noted that she was smell quite pleasant. From childhood, the tone was piled up, and she did not do anything. And now she cared about her brother all the time. Trying the food prepared by her sister, Qing did not let out thoughts about revenge for their family. However, the billionaire should try a haircut of the tone, as he immediately went with his nose. While the cripple cursed a piece of salt, welded in a bitter bile, a girl who was resting on the bed woke up. Rubbing her sleepy eyes, she was glad that her brother finally stopped playing. Shen, grimacing with food, apologized to the tone because he accidentally woke her. The girl was curious to find out how much her porridge was, but Qing lied, saying that she was very tasty. The sister was delighted that his brother liked the prepared food, asking him to eat her more likely. The billionaire immediately froze, for whom to eat a porridge prepared by a sister was akin to torture, from the spoon in which the terrible cooking was almost the death itself. Drinking his tears, the guy brought porridge to his mouth so as not to offend his sister, who tried so hard over her. The next day, the food prepared with love was not in the best way. A nurse came to the patient that she asked his well-being. Since the guy was very sick yesterday, the girl wanted to know if he had been easily an hour. The nurse knew that the patient was rich, and despite his injury, she wanted to live a luxurious life with him. Shen explained that he was just a little tired after the game, but otherwise he felt normally. The nurse asked the guy to contact her if he suddenly needs something. The girl stated that she would do everything for the healing of the patient, who asked for a chair to roll up to him. But the rich guy only wanted to play, which brought the doctor's assistant to confusion. The nurse could not believe that the cripple was more important than some game, instead of communication with the opposite sex. Having fulfilled the patient's request, the girl decided that today it just looked not very good. Only Shen was in a capsule as he put on his virtual reality glasses and entered the game. In a matter of seconds, the consciousness of the young billionaire was transferred to Chao Tshu Van. But when the player opened his eyes, he did not expect to see the picture that turned out in front of him. The number of participants in the game increased to 300,000 from the moment of the first entrance of Qing. The guy noticed that many people began to join the game, so he had to hurry to pump his level. After looking at the uniforms of his character, the player came to the conclusion that he needed a first-class equipment. In order to deal with the 20th bosses, the hunter went to the store. At first, the owner of the store did not pay much attention to the visitor who entered. But as soon as the man was holding his gaze on the hunter, silver armor caught his eye. The owner asked what could be useful to the buyer, who was not attracted to nothing of the goods presented. The player explained that he needed an object from the treasure store, causing a stupor from the seller. Having come to his senses, the man replied that he had no treasures in the store. But even if they had, the owner doubted the solvency of the guy. The hunter decided to dispel the merchant's doubts, throwing him a precious stone. The man, as soon as he received a valuable item, instantly increased his location to the client. The player formed a bright explosion that, according to the store owner, was the opening of a secret passage. The man convinced Shenya that the things in front of him were supposed to be sold a month after the opening of the server. Inspecting the armor, the guy called them silver garbage, which shocked the merchant. But among the proposed goods, there was something that managed to attract the attention of the electoral buyer. The ghostly hunter turned to a man that was already stretched out in a smile, guessing that the guy decided on the purchase. From the entire assortment, Chinu liked the mask that was under a glass cap. The man claimed that the mask was the only game in the game, but because of the crystal stone, he was ready to make a generous client a discount. The merchant was speechless when he received the full amount for the goods that an ordinary person had to be collected within a year. The hunter asked the store owner to leave a discount to himself and inform him when something worthwhile appeared in the shop. The guy spent 2 million yuan on the purchase of a unique mask, which was quite cheap for such an item. By pressing the finger to the corresponding button, the owner of the mask removed its display. The ghostly hunter liked that it was possible to choose what to display and what to hide. The white tiger mask terrified monsters and players below the level than its owner. Passers-by were surprised that one of the players could have a gold-class item. Around the sight of a ghostly hunter, they sensed a catch, since there were no gold equipment in the stores. The stranger's hand suddenly lay on Shenya that he asked him to stop. The player was unhappy that one of the characters in the game dared to touch him. The man, noting what level the guy had equipment, asked to lend him. Having deactivating the mask, Ching asked the passers by whether they really wanted to lend his clothes. The stranger only grinned, meanwhile, when his accomplices were already looking forward to the fight for valuable objects. Then the ghostly hunter specified with what on earth to share with his equipment. The players began to explain that Shen was a crook, and if he did not want him to be brought to the ban, he had to give his things. Such a bold statement only made fun of the hunter, who was curious what would happen if he did not agree. Disagreements between the players attracted outsiders that they decided, whether it was a guy who was caught hot for his fraud. The men who attacked the equipment of Chao Chu-van said that they would rob him in case of refusal. One of the players' detachment was only glad that many people would witness how they punished the guy. The archer suddenly shouted that it was time to teach a lesson to the player that he used cheat codes. The billionaire was not impressed by the warlike speech of one of the self-confident robbers. But to his surprise, Ching discovered that a crowd of passers-by supported the players, standing to their side. Everyone around began to chant, so that the Trinity punished the dishonestly playing a participant in the divine way. The leader of the gang advised the guy to voluntarily give the equipment, which was in his own interests. The hooligans threatened to kill Sheeny, and to do this every time he starts from the very beginning, which only made the guy laugh. King noticed that in any of the worlds there were envious people who could not stand the people who are superior. The warrior and his accomplices of archers were the 4th level, which did not stand close in force next to the ghostly hunter. Having decided not to stand on ceremony with the Trinity, Shen invited them to stop hesitating and attacking. Self-confident players attacked the guy, threatening to demolish his head in just one step. During the attack, the item of the gold rank was automatically activated by attackers. The mask, protecting its owner, applied the effect of the shadow of the tiger, which was just right for this battle. The effect instantly spread to opponents, which was significantly lower than the rank. Players all as one instantly fell to the ground that were terrified by the tiger mask. The warrior that the first of the Trinity decided to take the equipment from the player, now he blooks with blood. The onlookers looked at each other, trying to find an answer. Witnesses of what they had just become. Approaching the exhausted warrior, Sen asked what they wanted to do with him. The ghostly hunter informed his id, which sounded like morning wine and an evening song. Witnesses of the showdown began to recall that somewhere they had already heard a similar nickname, which had a shorter name on the network as Chao Chu-van. The players were shocked when, after watching the leader's table, they found this character in the first place among all participants. The warrior who knew the defeat looked after the Shenya, who was leaving, whose person was discussing everything around. On a man who was lying in a puddle of his own blood, the effect of bleeding was imposed, which would soon lead him to death. The warrior turned to his brothers in arms, hoping that they still had a healing potion. But the picture, which appeared before the eyes of a wounded player, plunged him into wild horror. One of the archers who lured the crowd to their side, now decomposed, finally dying in battle. The same fate also overtook the 3rd member of the team that went to the Renaissance Point. Shen, after a fight with the players, arrived at a small house that was in the middle of the forest. Before returning to the battles with monsters, the guy had to finish one thing. In the pit, not far from that house, the ghostly hunter found the girl who was the daughter of Lady Gu. Going down to the child, the player asked if the baby was familiar with such a character as Madame Gu. The daughter quarreled that the stranger was not so adults to contact her like that. The guy did not accept the heart of insulting the girl, concentrating in practice. Bowing over her, the hunter clarified Li's name Gu Lin, that she was alert when he realized that the stranger knew who she was. With an ominous grimace, Shen informed the girl that her mother promised him that Lin would leave for him in 5 years. The girl was so surprised at the news that she was speechless. With tears in her eyes, Lin, demanding an explanation, rushed to her mother, while Shen barely restrained laughter. Lady Jiyu jumped out of the hut as soon as she heard the cries of a worried daughter. The girl wanted to know if her mother really passed her for a hunter who did not understand a word from her daughter's story. Having met the player, the girl could not believe that he managed to go through the most difficult test. The guy decided to remind you that he was a man of the word by finding the daughter of Madame Gu. She repeated that, regardless of what the hunter wanted, she was ready to escape if he dares to touch them. The billionaire was surprised when the NPC threatened with a shoot, which was enough to scare. Ching assured that there were no reasons for excitement, and that he needed only a map of the intermediate dungeon. Gu replied that she did not have the object needed by the player, but the uninvited guest did not believe her. Having clenched his fists, the guy said that he would be forced to show all the seriousness of his intentions. With an impenetrable expression on his face, a ghostly hunter swung at the girl. As much as possible, having pressed her daughter to her, Madame Gugu squeezed, expecting to get a blow from the guy. However, there was no hit, and the NPC decided to check what the player wanted to do with them. The Gu was stunned by the sight of a stone, and little Lin could not come off him. Shen explained that the stone was gratitude for the hidden class he received. The relationship of mother and daughter grew to a ghostly hunter of 50 units. The girl, all blushing, just in case, asked the player whether he had given her a stone. Baby Lin immediately grabbed a jewel from her mother's hands, after which she retired with him, not looking up from the decorations captivating her. The girl thanked the stranger. Mother, on the contrary, did not want to receive anything from the player, but the girl did not intend to part with the gift. Lin asked the hunter whether the stone was a sign of their engagement, which would take place in 5 years. Shen did not expect that the girl would be so seriously treated, but decided to play along with her, claiming that at first he needed a map from her mother. King was surprised when Madame Gu agreed to give her, contrary to the established rules. The girl said that the map could be transferred only 3 weeks later from the moment the server was opened, but decided to make an exception due to the stone. The system allowed the head of the village to distribute a card to players that they loved difficulties, and Lin knew where his house was. The girl, who already saw herself in the bride of the guy in the future, was ready to lead him to the head of the village. The elder, meanwhile, rested, staring in a deck chair under the rays of the scorching sun. The head of the village was half a girl by half a beast, which was indifferent to the fact that the straight rays of the sun harmed health. The rest of the beast-like creature was interrupted by something flying right in her direction. Baby Lin landed heavily directly on the stomach of the head, saying that some wanted to talk to her. The head of the village, returning to normal after the girl's appearance, asked who wanted to meet her. A Shen immediately appeared at the table, explaining that he was the very person who needed a map of the intermediate dungeon. The elder replied that the guy was in no hurry, and returned to her when he reaches the 20th level, not earlier. The player really needed to leave the village of Novichkov, so he decided to bribe the elder with a stone. The beast-like girl with indifference looked at the jewel that she reached her. The elder asked the hunter if he knew why she was the head of this village. She replied that she was an honest and serious person, advising Chine to return from where he came, even furtively, and took the stone to herself. The girl, who arrived with a stranger, asked the chapter to give the stone to her friend, if she was honest as she claimed. Taking a stone, Lin kindly returned to its owner, which only upset the head of the village. Having appreciated the act of the girl, the player advised the girl to give the card for her own good. The elder explained that if the hunter to go to the desired place now, he would sign a death sentence. The girl did not want to give a card so as not to interfere with other players, while Ching wanted to prove her power to the chapter. Extracted on a deck chair, the girl asked if the guy was seriously configured. The elder decided for an agreement that if the hunter fulfills her assignment, she would give him a card. Not wanting to waste time, the player was ready to fulfill it immediately. The chapter said that the village was attacked by a pack of wolves from year to year. The brave warriors who wanted to help in the end could not cope with the task, since the leader of the white wolves was the leader of the pack. The girl demanded to tear off the skin from the predatory beast, and then the task could be considered completed. The system notified the player about the side quest, the reward of which was an intermediate map of the dungeon. Getting up from the table, the head advised the chapter to prepare the reward for the test. In the end, the ghostly hunter promised that he would return to the village very soon. The guy wanted to leave, as Baby Lin stopped him, grabbing his hand. The girl claimed that she was able to protect the player. Stuffing him in his partners, the billionaire asked the girl to stop playing, and so that she would return to her mother. However, the NPC insisted on her own that she asked Ching permission to protect the village and defeat the wolf with him. The guy reported the head of the village for not following her residence at all. Suddenly, near Sheni, additional conditions of his mission arose, which was supposed to protect Gu Lin. No matter how the player would like to slip away from the boring girl, but he will have to go through the trials with her. Climbing the hunter's back as a monkey, the girl asked him if they should become a husband and wife in the future. Breaking out with crocodile tears, Lin said that she would not let Shenya go to the mission of one. With the onset of late in the evening, a ghostly hunter, along with the daughter of the mistress of the GU, came to place. Without leaving her future husband, Lin, looking around, said that she was scared. The girl gasped heavily when a piercing scream rang out near them. Shen was sure that the strangers would tell them the right road, which Lin was very doubted. In the thickets from where the screams came, one wolf from a pack of white predators was beheaded. Seeing to other players, Qing apologized that he distracted them from business, and asked where the wolf lair could be. The team, consisting of characters of various classes, advised the stranger to fail from their place. The ghostly hunter asked what the players had in mind, claiming that this place was them. The warrior that was the main thing in the detachment reminded Shenya what guild was now in the leaders, demonstrating his tattoo. The guy talked about the gang of green snakes, on which the image of a snake was on his hand. This information did not produce any effect on Qing, and the drawing itself was distinguished by color with the name of the gang. The warrior explained that this area was captured by his group, so Shini had to pay for stay in these parts. The leader of the team struck Lin, in which he immediately recognized the NPC to perform the quest. The ghostly hunter dropped that the warrior did not concern who the girl was, also noting that the methods of the detachment leader were not too effective. The player objected to the stranger, convincing that he did not mean anything about how the world of the game was arranged. The warrior mentioned that the local wolves were dangerous animals, capable of scribbled everyone that only frightened the companion of Shani. With a trembling voice, the daughter of Mrs. GU claimed that someone was behind the players. The guy was surprised, because he did not feel the presence of an outsider nearby. A detachment of players did not even know that the King of White Wolves appeared behind them. In order not to fall into the trap of the leader of the pack, the billionaire grabbed the girl and rushed away from the players. The hunter jumped as high as possible on one of the branches of the nearest tree in order to protect himself. Shen did not expect to hear from his colleagues in the game of mockery of him and his actions. The guy considered the detachment to be fools that they continued to talk about money instead of fleeing. Looking at the rivals, the hunter wondered. It was not that they completely had no self-preservation instinct. Suddenly, some kind of liquid poured on the head of the assassin, which was a surprise for the girl. She immediately turned around to find out what came on her head. Meeting with the mouth of the wolf, the predatory beast growled menacingly, from which the assassin's body, constrained by fear, ceased to obey her. And the next moment, the giant white wolf closed his jaw on the detachment participant. Players, numb from the horror of what was happening, watched that only legs remained from their girlfriend. And only after this, the detachment that controlled this area rushed off with all legs from the formidable enemy. The head of the leader of the pack burned with a bright flame, while the fog began to envelop him. In front of the member of the team, a predatory beast disappeared in a moment, so that after a second it appeared behind him. Thanks to the special movement technique, the white wolf was ahead of the players that they tried to hide from him. The monster, swinging with his huge paw, flashed his claws sharp like a blade. And while the White King Volkov was busy enemies on Earth, Shen studied his weakness, which was a zone of eyes. Preparing the weapon, the hunter was sure that the leader of the pack could not crank up a sudden disappearance without a couple of ants in the sleeve. The guy wanted to force the monster to demonstrate his skills to him, provoking him with an attack. But the player did not shoot at the enemy, who was unexpectedly prevented by the girl. Qing demanded that Lin do not interfere with him, but his companion would not agree with him, claiming that it was impossible to do this. Having reached his ears, the beast heard a hunter with NPC among themselves nearby. The white wolf, having guessing that an attempt was being prepared for him, decided to leave a secretive enemy. Leaving his shelter, jumping from a branch to the ground, Shen repeated that they needed to catch up with the leader. The girl explained that 5 players attracted the attention of the king as they killed many of his relatives, while the hunter with the current force of attack did not have a chance against the monster, for the battle with which it was necessary to prepare properly. The player asked Gulin how they would be able to find the white wolf in the future. The girl asked Shenya not to worry, showing him an auto-search card. While Qing wondered why the NPC did not show the card earlier, she kept repeating that it was not such a bad idea to take her. At this moment, the system announced the possibility of using evolution, which was very useful. The billionaire hoped to improve his characteristics using the skill of passive evolution. Shen wanted to demonstrate an artifact to his companion, applying this effect to his genealogy. But during activation, there was a mistake, which the hunter himself was more surprised by Lin. The system notified the player that there were no more accessible evolutions for Qing, that he was not particularly upset, since he had not lost anything. Of all the available evolutions, only one was available to the hunter for a phantom that he had not yet known to use. Before spending evolution on the ability, Qing wanted to see how she worked. Having ordered the system to activate the skill of the phantom, the hand of the ghostly hunter lit up. From it to the sky was followed by a certain bunch of energy, resembling the accumulation of water in a vacuum. The giant bubble rotated around its axis, even remotely not recalling its master. However, after a second, the soap ball burst, and an exact copy of the player appeared from it. When the phantom sank to the ground, the baby Lin was so scared that she involuntarily cried out. The guy's companion, with a trembling voice, said that her friend had created an exact version of himself from the water. Qing ordered the double to use a 7-star arrow to test his abilities. The same moment in the phantom in your hands was a bow with an arrow, which also did not differ from the original. A copy of the ghostly hunter, pulling the bowstring, was about to use the skill of a 7-star arrow. Shen ordered his copy to stop, because the fact that he saw was more than enough. The guy could not get enough that his water copy could use even skills. The idea that Phantom could use the same skills as he made the player think, and then the hunter suddenly dawned on which a brilliant idea came into the head. The billionaire ordered his copy to activate the skill of evolution, in this way bypassing the restrictions established by the game. On the hand of a double in a second, an object of the legendary class arose. With a phantom without words, he realized what he had to do, using the effect of evolution on his master. The evolution of a copy endowed Shenya with a double phantom, the opportunity to call its clone up to 2 times with a duration of a whole minute. The player to the last was not believed that his idea would work, and the separated phantoms could use active evolution. The girl was wondering if her companion used forbidden fraud. Singh replied that what he did was much better than any tricks, wondering what he had at the moment he had a percentage of victory. The girl was surprised when the probability of winning the battle grew by 20%. The player said that he did not stop there and wanted to increase the percentage of a successful duel, calling for a 7 pros arrow. As a result, the effect of fire was added to the skill. But the guy expected that instead he would be one more. NPC explained that the arrow was originally a very strong skill, but now the hunter's chances of the hunter grew to 34 units. The system notified that the reloading of the phantom was over, although Shen did not expect that it would take so little time. Having called for 2 identical copies, the ghostly hunter was going to use the remaining evolution. The billionaire ordered the game to activate the skill, waiting for another improvement. But the game notified Qing of the impossibility of using the skill that was on reloading. Then the guy plunged into thought, suggesting that the phantom adopted some of the skills of the main body. The hunter came to the conclusion that the next time he had to use both improvement of the phantom before activating it. Having ordered Lin to follow him, Sen said that they should have come up with another strategy to increase the chance of victory. Not to mention where he kept the way, the player brought the NPC to the river, where the crocodile hunted his victims. Invisibly sneaking up to a small fish, the toothy monster opened his mouth in order to swallow it. However, the predator failed to make the plan. As the arrow released by Shenem pierced him, the hunter did not even doubt that he would fall into the crocodile when he aimed at him from a bow. The player got the meat of a predator, which, in addition to restoration of health, also increased the speed of movement. With a click of fingers, the billionaire called on 2 phantoms to help him commit his plan. I turned to the daughter of Mrs. Gu. The guy asked her not to worry, claiming that they would soon be eaten up. An hour later, Lin felt a pleasant severity in the stomach, eating delicious meat. A hearty dinner increased the charm of NPC by 30 units, and Qing explained that the meat was tasty due to the high class of fish. Thanks to the 3 phantoms, the couple managed to accumulate objects for the recovery with which they will cope with the King of Wolves. When asked what the percentage of a chance of victory was now, the girl replied that he was hesitated in the area of 40. Such an answer was completely arranged by the hunter that he was about to meet with the King of Wolves. NPC asked the satellite to wait for her, not even suspecting that some were following them. A group of unfamiliar players watched the couple intently, the purpose of which was to find out who the guy and the girl were. Very soon, thanks to the help of Lin, the player with her reached the enemy's den. Together with the appeal of phantoms, the player also activated the skill of a deadly trap. Shen calculated that thanks to each phantom, he will be able to call on a total of 4 traps. Repeating this process from time to time, the ghostly hunter intended to increase the number of traps. And soon, thanks to the manipulation with phantoms, Qing created a real web of death, arranging many traps near each other. The girl wondered if the guy was zealous too much, because the chance of victory after everything did not increase. The player claimed that King Volkov was quick, and therefore, It was necessary to limit his movement. Even after the explanation, Lin remained skeptical, because the chance of victory did not even reach 50%. Shen told his partner not worried, and leave all other details of the plan for him. The hunter asked the girl to hide behind a tree, around which he put traps for her safety. Meanwhile, as himself, standing opposite the entrance to the lair of the beast, the player invited him to go out and fight. The fiery eye of the monster flashed in the darkness, before appearing in front of his enemy. The giant white wolf finally seemed to the player that he had left his lair. Shen was waiting for the moment when the beast would come closer to him to get his traps in the net. But instead of attacking the enemy, the king of wolves suddenly began to sniff. After the monster smiled something in the air, he remained standing still, grinning his face. Then the beast decided to return to his cave with a slow step, leaving Qing alone. The guy was surprised how good the enemy's instinct was that he decided not to endanger himself. The girl furtively watched how the ghostly hunter expressed her indignation to the enemy. Lin wanted to look at the guy's skills, and if he really turns out to be capable, she will seriously think about marrying him. Absorbed in his thoughts, NPC did not notice how the leader of the gang of players who followed them crept up to her. Shen suddenly received a notification from the system that one of his traps was activated. Without taking his gaze from the cave, the player tried to understand how this could happen. Because King Volkov did not touch any of the traps, the billionaire guessed that if the traps remained unharmed at the entrance, then they were involved in another place. The player turned to check in what condition was his companion, who was taken hostage by strangers. With tears in her eyes, Lin demanded that the bandits immediately let her go. The subjects of the leader of the gang, whatever fell into the traps arranged, asked him to deactivate them. Shen was not long in coming for a long time, and after a few seconds he came running to strangers that they stole NPC. The girl threatened that if they did not let her go, then her husband would smear the entire gang along the wall. Information about marriage, Lin forced the boss to ask how old she was. King wanted to fall through the ground before the girl tells those present what she had in mind. And at the same moment she began to ask the player, calling him her husband, to save her, as she fell into the hands of bandits. Strangers, having learned that the hunter was with youngsters, began to laugh at him. The leader of the gang, passing the girl to his assistant, asked Shenya if he knew to whom these lands belonged. The player replied that he was aware of the fact that gangs had a group of green snakes. The gang's discontent grew, because the stranger, knowing everything, dared to appear on the land and increase his level here. The kidnappers stated that in the middle of the white day, his named brothers disappeared in these parts. The player wanted to know if the ghostly hunter was somehow involved in the disappearance of his people. The billionaire repeated that it was not connected with this, and that if the gang wait a bit, then they themselves will be announced. The captain of the detachment considered that such a coward as Shen could not cope with his people, wanting to find out his true intentions. The guy did not want to disclose all the cards, so the evil, from the answer, said that he was just walking around the district. One of the team members did not believe the stranger, claiming that a hidden boss could be here. Sina did not give rest the moment of the appearance of these characters that were sure that they could defeat the White Wolf. The hunter offered the gang a deal that he would give him a girl in return for a hidden boss. The leader of the gang was outraged that some kind of rogue dared to offer a deal. The detachment participant explained that Yang Zhong was in front of the player, who occupied the 27th line in the divine list. It turned out that almost half of the shares of the company, where Father John Chen dominated, belonged to Shen Qinu. The guy demanded from a ghostly hunter to give all values and coins for daring to argue. On the demands of the leader of the gang of the Green Snake, the billionaire only grinned, considering them an empty sound. Shen warned the hunters that he did not want to bring to this moment, but they left him no other choice. The player raised his hand in order to call his phantoms and punish arrogant bandits. But before the guy had time to click his fingers, a piercing scream rang out of the cave. The gang was delighted when I found a hidden boss in the cave, despite the fact that Shen already spoke about this earlier. Then Jian Chen called on the gang of green snakes to follow him in order to subsequently get into the divine list. The gang rushed headlong on the hidden boss, not even suspecting who he was. The assistant commander returned the hunter the girl, insisting that they would deal with him later. I observed the bandits running into the cave. Qing asked himself how the group was able to reach its level. The players rushed to the enemy, not even preparing for a fight, and without searching the terrain. One of the team members stepped on one of the traps that was prepared for the King of Wolves. The gang of green snakes was connected by chains, wondering where these traps came from. Jian Chen wildly scared when the muzzle of the monster hung over him, which lived in a cave. As soon as the wolf left his lair and appeared in front of the players in all its glory, the gang of green snakes screamed with horror. The boss scanned, One of the participants in the detachment shouted that the creature was a 20th level. The guy told his people not to panic, because thanks to the money spent, he bought the talent of a warrior and berserker. Chen demonstrated to all the talent of giant berserk to all present, which escaped from his body. The monster who appeared from the player was to match the leader of the pack, equal to him in size. Berserk temporarily increased the force and its attack over 100%, but the effect of only half a minute acted. Studying the hidden talent of the enemy, Shenyu could not believe that there was such a skill. Eating a piece of meat, NPC was interested in whether a ghostly hunter would fulfill his mission. The guy replied that there was no reason for haste, allowing the opponents to frolic a little. The members of the gang chanted the name of their leader that he was transformed into a giant monster. Jan Chen repeated that his talent gave a huge increase in strength, that he did not allow his defense to break through. However, only one blow, the King of Wolves managed to break through the body of the head of the gang of green snakes. The people of the warrior were shocked that the monster was so simple with their commander. Continuing to analyze everything, Qing discovered that the steel claw had applied 800 damage units, breaking through the enemy's protection. Above the berserker's head, a health scale flaunted, which was practically at 0. The monster threw back the giant enemy away, which did not see the point of finishing it. The defeated chapter of the gang crashed to the ground, concerned his subordinates with his appearance. The players understood that they were several times weaker than the commander, and therefore began to run in order to escape from the monster. Continuing to stand still, a ghostly hunter watched with contempt as a gang packed her tail at the sight of a strong enemy. And while the green snake sparkled with heels, the billionaire was preparing to enter the duel with the leader of the wolf pack. The monster suddenly howled piercingly, echoing in his howl in the vicinity. This speech allowed the king to call for the help of his henchmen. The team members with horror found that a flock of wolves went in pursuit of them. The members of the detachment began to argue whether it was necessary to return for the commander, because there were only a second level against them. Most insisted that it was risky to fight against such a pack. The citizen of the leader of the gang repeated his partner that now was not the time to heroize. Looking around, the man asked for forgiveness from his commander, because they left him on the battlefield. The participant of the detachment, watching Xin, decided that he wanted to commit suicide, once headed to the monster. In fact, the guy came to Jian Chen parallel to praising the white wolf for taking advantage of traps to take revenge on the dead wolves. But after that, the ghostly hunter said that from now on he was an enemy of the leader of the wolf pack. The head of the green snake decided to pretend to be dead and watch the arrogant boy. The views of the player and the monster met, each of which did not want to give in to his opponent. Literally in a second, several wolves appeared around the billionaire that they attacked him without hesitation. The player did not feel the slightest sense of fear of a hanging threat. Reaching for the temples, having activated the mask, the guy claimed that the tiger was not worth it to be afraid of ordinary wolves. Shiny tiger, which arose behind the back of Shenya, made predatory animals doubt his strength. The king of Volkov in bewilderment watched how his wards were discarded by the ability of the object. Watching the fallen animals, the leader of the pack for a moment lost his vigilance. However, he understood this too late, in the face of which the arrows released by the hunter had already looked. Due to its incredible speed, the monster managed to dodge each of the attacks. Shen understood that his accuracy could not compete with such an adversity of the enemy, from which he was supposed to change tactics. And at the very moment when the leader of the pack used a steel claw, the player decided to take a chance, putting everything on the end. Baby Lin could not find a place for herself. Watching Qing collided in hand-to-hand combat with the King of Wolves. The girl was madly scared when she saw that the guy gave the monster to pierce himself. The muzzle of the beast grinned, taking away a quarter of his health from the enemy, breaking through his armor with this. With a bloodied mouth, Shen asked the enemy from what he was so satisfied. The guy continued to communicate with the monster, asking, did he really decide that he could evade his attack? The player explained that if the wolf is evading, then his phantoms will not be able to get on the target. The doubles of Sheni released a double salvo of the seed fiery arrow on the enemy. The monster immediately threw the hunter away from him that he was an obstacle. Slowing his movement, the beast at the last moment tried to get away from the attack, despite its large radius of action. Many fire arrows were doomed to enter the ground, which never reached their goal. Standing in front of the monster, the billionaire called him, wanting to continue the conversation. The guy was interested in whether the enemy liked the next trap, which he caught this time. No matter how fast the wolf was, he could not get away from all the arrows released into it, which lost almost half of his health. Shen claimed that he set the trap through the entire area, limiting the wolf in movement throughout the area. Restoring health with a crocodile meat, Chinu was curious who would overcome whom. Such impudence only angry more and more angry king of the wolves. Jumping, taking the dust table, the monster suddenly disappeared into space. Shen did not expect that the enemy had the opportunity to use the invisibility spell. The guy did not have time to come to his senses. The gigantic head of the beast was already behind him. The monster inflicted one blow after another, managing to teleport to the hunter before he falls to the ground. Bringing from numerous blows, the player late recalled that with the help of the same technique, the wolf defeated the participants of the gang snake. Qing once again watched as his enemy, being in front of him, disappears again. The billionaire, having studied the enemy's technique, managed to notice how he again was next to him. However, he could not oppose the king, continuing to receive damage, losing health faster. With one strong blow, the beast stopped the chain hit and nailed the guy to the ground. Rising to his feet, Shen bit away the enemy who, with endless attacks, preventing him from healing. While the ghostly hunter was conscious, his insidious enemy was again behind him. Using the moment, while the player was vulnerable, using a steel claw, the wolf attacked him. However, the monster was not destined to get to Shini, that he fell into one of his traps placed. The guy became sincerely sorry that the wolf was good only in close combat, and his attacks only contributed to the activation of traps arranged around him. Supposing that now his turn has come, Qing shot at the immobilized leader of the pack. The arrow sticking out of the monster's eyes not only angered him, but also gave new strength. Rushing the chains that had begged him, the enemy in a fit of rage rushed at the ghostly hunter. The beast was enough to touch the guy with only his claw to take away 800 health units from him. The king bristled his face, as if asking the player what he intended to do now. The billionaire said that he was predicted by such a turn of events when traps were powerless against the monster. Shen did not deliberately dodge, for which these 3 seconds were needed to detain the enemy in one place. Once again, copies of the wounded hunter were materialized over the white wolf. The monster, as for the first time when he ran into the phantoms, threw the guy aside. This moment was enough to hit the giant back with chains, making it a vulnerable target. Qin's doubles resorted to the skill of a seed flame arrow, multiplying it. The owner also joined his minions that he chose the same ability to attack. As a result, the giant king of Volkov was attacked 21 simultaneous blow of fiery arrows. At this very time, some of the participants in the game decided to hunt wolves later. The girl who pointed to the place where the predatory animals lived was shocked when she saw an explosion from there. Her comrade was also amazed at the size of the explosion, suggesting for a split second that nuclear weapons were present in the game. NPCs who arrived in time for his future husband was delighted with the sight arranged by him. After a series of attacks, the giant enemy was finally defeated, finding himself at the bottom of the pit. Restoring health with meat, Shen wanted to learn how to use illusions in battle. Lin asked the guy to finish off the enemy as soon as possible to fulfill the mission. But the player was not going to rush. The girl was wary when the hunter said that they should have done something else. Jan Chen that all this time was pretended to be dead, thinking about why everything around was plunged into silence. The guy came to the conclusion that the stranger was defeated by the monster, but decided not to stick out ahead of time, watching what would happen next. At that moment, an arrow pierced near the green snake commander, forcing himself to declassify himself. The leader of the gang did not believe that Shen killed the king of the wolves, that it really was so, because the monster was on the last gasp. The bandit fell to his knees in front of the hunter and asked to spare him that he was a fool, not recognizing his strength at once. King was ready not only to forgive the player, but also to allow him to pick up the experience that had fallen from the king of the wolves. The billionaire said that he would do this, but in return he will need something from the opponent. Due to the circumstances, the hunter could not say about all the details. But when the time comes, he would find a way to contact John Chen. The guy asked if the head of the gang agreed, instructing him an arrow in order to push the decision to make. Shen wanted to enlist the influence of the Yang family before the Chanxi begins to cooperate with other groups in the company. The head of the green snake specified, claiming that the hunter, after his consent, would immediately get down to business. Qing confirmed his guesses, stating that it would be strange to agree to a deal without discussing its conditions. The player insisted that he would never have relied on a person who would not be greedy. Jan Chen was ready to help Shen Yu in everything that would be in his power, if he would help the guy fix the leader's position in the gang of green snakes. The ghostly hunter involved the skill of a 7 sustained arrow, which surprised his future partner. The arrows released by him did not fly into the robber, as it might seem at first, but in the wolf lying on the bottom of the hole, filling the pit with a huge explosion, which destroyed the monster. Sen confirmed the deal with Jan Chen. The leader of the gang snake was sweating from the demonstration of the skills of a ghostly hunter. Both players received an increase in the level. Qing switched to the 15th, while Chen from the 8th to the 10th. Being immensely grateful to Shenya, the head of the local group promised him to pay off. The billionaire asked him to contact him by the name of the character, but not to call him an older brother. In the end, the player warned his ally that if his name was used to do dirty deeds, then Jan would regret that he survived. The guy, being the head of the gang of green snakes, swore that he would be faithful to his older brother until the end of his death. Having finished all the affairs in this location, Qing called to him the daughter of Madame Gu, saying that they were leaving. The ghostly hunter reminded the head of the gang that when the time comes he will contact him. Having bowed, Jan Chen said that the kindness of his elder brother would definitely return to him. The girl was so impressed by the work of Shenya that she gave her consent to the wedding, which only angered him. The guy could not stand it and dumped the whole truth, telling that he was just joking, and the girl was a NPC with basic information in the child's body. Also, the billionaire asked Lin to stop calling his husband so that people would not think about him anything bad. An angry girl with the words that she was not a child bit a hunter in her neck. The daughter of Mrs. Gua claimed that she was a young woman, and her companion became interested in who created her. The player asked his partner to stop hysteria, and instead it is better to check the collected prey. The first trophy was the pants of the white wolf, which, with full health, increased the speed of movement by 100%. Shen was wildly delighted with equipment, thanks to which he would fly directly during the battle. The next award was Steel Wolf Claws, which allowed to instantly teleport behind the enemy's back for an unexpected attack. The hunter defined the subject as a silver garbage, causing a Lin to be perplexed in the baby. The claws followed the wool of the white wolf, which belonged to the class of rare things. Studying this valuable subject, the hunter noted that he needed the skin to complete the mission. Suddenly, the ability of passive evolution was activated, which determined the legendary skill of calling for wolves of the minions. The player was even more delighted when he finally got the opportunity to make an assembly. The hunter spent 20 silver coins studying the skill, and left everything else as a consumable. Meanwhile, Madame Gu, shed with tears, asked herself where the hunter with her daughter disappeared. The girl accused the head of the village for letting the guy with the child to fight against the king of the wolves. Listening to the lamentations of the poor mother, the elder, thanks to her big ears, heard something. It turned out that the sounds made belonged to a ghostly hunter, next to which the whole and sound Lin was going on. Mother said that she was glad to see the daughter alive and healthy, for which the girl asked to thank her companion. The player, not ceremony, threw the skin of the murdered wolf that she asked the head of the village. The girl admitted that she did not believe in the victory of the guy, agreeing that he was an unusual person. The elder climbed to the place where she kept the promised reward for the execution of the quest. The beast, said that there was a meeting place for the levels from the 20th to the 40. But the head decided to give it to look at the suffering of the guy. The elder insisted that the tests would be harder, but the reward for them is much better. To which the player replied that everything would be in order with him. The girl, watching Sheeny, clarified with him if he was going to leave the village. The guy was flattered by the devotion of the NPC, asking him not to want to go with him. Madame Gu, grabbing her daughter, attacked a hunter with accusations, demanding that he stop flirting with her daughter. Baby Lin said that she wanted to go with the player, but her mother tried to reason her. Turning to Chin, the girl said that he could leave as he received an interlevel card. The ghostly hunter would be glad to leave, but for the valuable skin of the wolf received only one card, which was dishonest in his opinion. The elder stood up for a Gu, who also believed that the guy began to impudent, filling his price. The player asked not to find fault with the words, claiming that he simply wanted to achieve an honest deal. The billionaire was sure that such characters as the head of the village had to be well pressed to get what he wanted. The hunter, blinding the beam with a ray of light, asked her a beast-like girl, so she wanted to reward the hero of the killed wolf. Shen was pleased with himself because he also received an epic skill as a reward. The guy was pleasantly surprised when he discovered the treasure hidden by the head, in the form of a powerful blow skill. Qing decided to try out a new ability, starting the arrow that everything around him touched a shockwave. The arrow reached the mountain in the distance, and besides what she did in it, she left an impressive mark in it. The player was lucky to learn an epic skill for a modest fee in 20 silver coins. Shen complimented the head of the village, which recognized those who made efforts. Turning to the girl, who did not take his eyes off him, the guy said that they would still see, wanting to grow big. After that, the player rushed straight on the water, leaving his friends on the shore of the village. Burning with tears, Baby Lin accused the ghostly hunter of the absence of a heart because of his cruel act. Very soon, the player was in the suburbs, before which the endless sea was spread. Shen unfolded the map received from the Elder, on which the city was depicted immediately behind the waterfall. Only the billionaire opened the card, as in the sea immediately shone with a sudden bright light. Magically, a city appeared in front of a guy on the water called Roy's City. Qing looked at the city, in which he was already once, where there were a lot of standing things. Before his rebirth, the player spent 2 months hunting bulls, and therefore visiting Roy's City realized that all things were dismantled. But fortunately, Shen calculated the location of all chests and bosses, and upon reaching a 40 level, could take the attributes from the game to the real world. He wanted Xiao Tiancai to wait until he returned and force him to go through all the circles of hell. However, before visiting the city, a ghost hunter wanted to clean the inventory. Exchanging unnecessary objects for currency, a billionaire came to the house of an auction, where the auction was in full swing. Looking around, Qing noticed a lot of people that for him, it was only at hand, because with the help of them he would quickly sell objects from inventory. A girl with hair ears asked the visitor for what purpose he visited the institution. Bet or put up goods for sale. The employee, pointing to the registration table, asked to take the subject from which a small commission would be charged for the successful sale. When exposing the goods at the auction, the guy wanted to maintain anonymity and did not reveal his personality to other players. The host of the auction asked the audience to greet the next player and his subject. A woman was a participant in the auction that stepped on stage in high-heeled shoes. The men who watched the bidding were fascinated by the contestant, who were embarrassed from her only one. Diao Chan, winking at the public, which she managed to bewitch with her beauty, greeted everyone. Looking at the guys that they literally lost their heads from the girl that was on stage, Qing did not understand that it was so unusual in her. The host of the event pointed to the ring of greed in the hands of the girl, which increased the luck of the character by 10 units. A special effect of the ring was the speed of loss and an increase in the money earned. Shen overheard how the man appreciated the ring of 5 silver coins, while the lady was alienated nearby, that the girl was the real value. The hunter immediately remembered the ring so that there were only 2 classes, bronze and diamond. The ring of greed of diamond quality increased the luck of the owner by 50 units, and also guaranteed gold equipment from monsters. While Qing was thinking about the ring, the leading auction took the first bet in 30 silver coins. The man had already begun to count how the ghostly hunter interrupted the bet by appointing 1 gold coin for the subject. The auction participants considered the stranger crazy that he was ready to give a gold coin for such garbage. However, the man who stood next to Shen interrupted his bet, offering 10 gold for the ring. Spectators of the event insisted that it was madness to give such an amount for this subject. While people around condemned wealthy players, Qin's rival looked at him. The ghostly hunter decided that the ranger was known to the value of the ring that had entered into a bidding for him. But the guy was not right or not, putting on a lot of 30 gold. The competitor's face, who smiled quite a second ago, darkened in hearing the declared amount. The man understood that if he did not overdo the stranger's bet, he would lose, losing the desired object. Then the ranger offered 50 gold for the bronze class ring, overwhelming by this amount of the presenter. The competitor of Shenya was observing the guy. He was interested in whether his wallet would compete with him, and suddenly a ghostly hunter dared to raise his hand in order to announce his bet. Inside, the ranger got colder, despite the fact that the player has not yet voiced his bet. The young billionaire doubled the opponent's bet, announcing that he would pay 100 gold coins for the ring. For some time, a grave silence hung in the auction house, since the declared amount of the guy was akin to the whole fortune. The man who led the auction, despite the absurdity of his question, asked if one of the present was ready to offer more. Since there were no more proposals, the presenter began to count, and the ranger was bored with Qing's angry gaze. Visitors to the auction discussed the loss of the ranger meanwhile as a man from the stage read to 3. The host, hitting a hammer, shouted that the ring of greed was sold to a ghostly hunter. The guy, considering the acquired decoration, thought that in 8 hours he would be able to improve the ring and increase his condition. Suddenly, the ranger spoke to Shini, claiming that the guy was distinguished by courage. However, the man did not limit himself to a compliment, and also threatened the player, assuring him to remember him. However, the threats of the ranger did not act on a guy who had already put forward claims by other players before. Observing how his opponent leaves, Qing did not understand why it was so much offended by such nonsense. Suddenly, the former owner of the greed ring touched the guy's face. Leaning against the hunter, Dao-chan said that he was at her disposal tonight. The player could not understand what he did so special to get the location of the stranger. Loiling with paint, the girl claimed that the guy deliberately overpaid the ring only to get her attention. The hunter threw it into cold sweat. which did not even know about the rules established by the auction. The girl, watching the excitement on the rich man, asked him not to worry. The stranger insisted that despite being in the game, the guy would be able to relax better than in reality. Chan whispered to Shini's ear that there was no reason for concern, since the game would help with the rest. And then the billionaire finally dawned that the ranger wanted to get not a ring at all, but by the company of its former owner. Having examined the girl from head to toe, the hunter said that she could be useful to him later. The beauty, having received praise from the buyer that she bought her item, suggested not to delay the time. Suddenly, the girl's flirtation disappeared somewhere, on her face that was perplexed. Behind the ghostly hunter, a mysterious man appeared, blurring in a smile. The girl demanded an explanation from a man who he was, what turned out to be an ordinary merchant, who offered the player to look at his collection. An employee of the Aujuction's house was jealous of Amanda Shenya, who could interest Ching more than her. But the merchant hoped to have a good earnings from a guy, considering him a fool who was unknown to the price of items, after buying a bronze ring. In the arsenal of the man, there were leather armor, studded bronze shoes, and silver onion of the wind. Looking at the objects, the player wondered if it was a shame for the seller to offer such garbage. The man assured that the silver bow was suitable for the hunter, that he asked for only 2,000 gold for him. But Ching refused to take something. The merchant was offended when he heard the potential buyer called his objects garbage. The seller decided to teach the lesson an arrogant rich. Grabbing him by the collar of the cloak, the merchant demanded either to apologize to him by buying out objects, or get a good thrashing from him. However, the mood of a man quickly changed, and a grimace of horror froze on his face. The ghostly hunter instantly darkened, interested in the merchant. He really wanted to die because of such nonsense. Diao stood up for the guy that she intended to spend the rest of the evening with him, ordering a man to stop taking him to his rubbish. She also pointed out the protection that she had long looked in their direction, since the transactions between the players in the house were prohibited. A large pumped woman really did not take her eyes off the merchant and the hunter. The man, meeting his gaze with security, understood that he would not be able to teach a guy to teach a guy. The angry seller left, without ceasing to shower the player with various curses. Shen was ready to instantly send the merchant to the place of rebirth, but did not know that then his name would fall into a blacklist of auctions. Returning to his reward, the guy asked if the girl was obliged to do everything he would say. Blinking, the beauty replied that, without a ceremony, she would perform any whim of a ghostly hunter. The guy ordered the girl to follow the sale of silver weapons at the auction, as well as purchase cleaning chips if they appear. Chan could not believe that she was instructed to help deal with the sale of goods at the auction. Shen also added that if a girl proves herself using her appearance, then at the auction she will not be equal. Diao Chan was offended that she was not perceived as a woman, so she abandoned the assignment. As soon as the guy mentioned that he would pay the girl for the work done, she had already prepared to lay out objects for sale, leaving his assistant alone. Ching said that the time would come, he himself would find her. The girl was happy that she came across a confident, rich, and handsome guy. The pissing chip needed the player to buy hidden items, and everyone who traded sold the chip under the guise of precious stone. The next step of Shenya, until the chip appeared, was an improvement in its equipment. In order for the armor to become many times better, the billionaire came to the local forge. However, the blacksmith that he worked there fought in hysteria, without imagining what he would do now. The reason for this behavior was the loss of his hammer, without which he could not continue his work. From heavy thoughts, the man was distracted by a ghostly hunter who quietly entered the forge. Holding a hammer in his hand, the guy asked if a man was looking for him for an hour. The blacksmith was wildly happy when he discovered his loss, asking where the stranger found him. Shining with happiness, the blacksmith raised the instrument over his head, returning the desire to live with him. In gratitude, the man was ready to improve any equipment that the guy had. Ching learned about this hidden quest after watching the game management, and the mysterious forge made it possible to improve the character's equipment once. Having demonstrated his bow, the guy asked the blacksmith to improve it to the maximum to stop fighting with small-level monsters. The man without any objections set to work, and his stove was again kindled. The billionaire looked through his inventory while the master was busy with his weapon, and just after some 20 minutes, the man appeared to the player to report the end of the work. Not expecting the blacksmith to manage so quickly, the guy was eager to see the updated bow. The man was able to improve weapons only to the 10th level, without having the necessary materials at hand, demanding a modest 20 gold from the player. But even such a result was quite satisfied with Ching, who in any case intended to replace the bow with another weapon. Walking through the forest, Shen thought about further plans for promotion in the game. Since the maximum level of the bosses was the 60s, the player wanted to wait for the reload of evolution before joining them. And while the hunter was busy with his thoughts, a stranger was aimed at his arrow. The arrow launched by the archer had great power, raising a column of dust around her. The stranger, watching a calm goal, was sure that everything would go as it should. However, at the last moment, the instinct of a ghostly hunter worked, reporting an impending threat. A fraction of a second was not enough to pierce the guy with an arrow, leaving a cut on his cheek. Thanks to the pumped dexterity, Shan dodged the attack, and the bloodied tip eventually stuck into the tree. The archer who shot at the billionaire declassified himself, praising him for outstanding skills. The archers turned out to be a ranger who admitted that he was not ready for the fact that his targets would be able to evade an attack from an ambush. She recognized the arrow and hastened to explain to the man, saying that he needed only an object. But the ranger did not consider the incident that the incident did not consider the incident, claiming that it was too late to ask for forgiveness, realizing that it was so easy for him not to get rid of the offended player. Shen asked that in this case, the shooter offered him, but instead of answering directly, the man began to whistle, which only gave rise to even more questions. The ghostly hunter was in complete bewilderment, as he could not understand what the whistle of his enemy actually was. Suddenly, 3 characters appeared next to the ranger, one of which was an offended merchant. But more for the appearance of sudden guests, the guy was surprised at the one who was with them. A huge man was holding the hair assistant to the hunter Diao Chan that the tearful was kneeling. The player demanded an explanation why the villains grabbed the girl who was supposed to work for him. The man emphasized the financial situation of Shini, deciding that the guy should share his wealth with the accomplices of the ranger. Diao Chan apologized to the hunter for having lost the remaining money and cleansing chips. The merchant said that he managed to get the player's money, even if he refused to buy his items. The angry man hardened that the couple prevented his plans, after which he kicked the girl with his foot. With the former brilliance in his eyes, the seller turned to Chin, noticing that they had met again. The player was still theft of his things, but he could not endure when he humiliated and beat his workers. This speech of a ghostly hunter did not make any impression on villains. The big man became ridiculous from the fact that the girl worked for the guy, claiming that this idea was only the beginning. The hand of a giant warrior reached for the hostage, which he held with his foot. The next moment, the man began to beat the girl with his palm, which was desperately calling Shenya to help. I observed the atrocities, so the rangers called brothers. The guy was darkened, becoming darker than the night. Suddenly, glimpses of mysterious lightning began to come to the trinity of villains. This strange anomaly attracted the attention of a long-haired young man from the ranger detachment. The lightning arose was the matter of Qing's hands that he prepared to make a strong blow. The guy's eyes were filled with blood that he advised the players to prepare for his own death. The long-haired guy did not agree, advising the hunter not to even think about this reception. The guy with blades quickly went around the enemy from behind, with a war cry jumped on him. However, as soon as the young man was piercing his daggers, as the archer was already behind him, the ghostly hunter nevertheless released the arrow that passed through the long-haired guy, depriving him of half of his body. Looking at the enemy, the billionaire informed him that he was not fast enough. The wounded player did not believe in what was happening until the last, claiming that this could not really be. A stray corpse, or everything that remains of it, collapsed to the ground, slowly dissolving. The big man with the merchant remained unhappy that the hunter dared to kill their comrade. Shen, on the loud statement of the opponents that they were going to tear him to pieces, just clicked his fingers. All the decisiveness of the couple disappeared instantly when Qing's assistants appeared in front of them. On both sides of the villains surrounded the phantoms that were called by a ghostly hunter. One of the player's assistants shot at the enemy that he made an attempt to hide. The second double followed the example of his partner, and also attacked the enemy with an arrow. Both fiery arrows divided the characters in two, not giving them the slightest chance of salvation. Diao Chan looked at the villains who abducted her with horror, because the men began to disappear after their comrade. The ranger stood aside, patted the guy, not expecting him to be so strong. The man repeated that he did not give a damn about the dead, who was more worried that he and Shen did not meet. The ranger introduced himself as Shibusha, that he was the 5th on the list, and during the duel he managed to scan the guy. The ghostly hunter tried to understand that his opponent wanted to tell him all this. The player claimed that a 15th level phantom hunter was only one guy named Chao Chu Van. Without the evasion, the guy confirmed that he was the same player that he had already managed to become famous on the server. Suddenly, the man threw China a bag in which there were 400 gold and 70 chips. The billionaire was glad that the player changed his mind, that he suddenly held out his hand. The ranger intended to form an alliance in order to join the efforts to earn a lot of money and get countless girls. Ching politely refused Shibusha, who was interested in what, in this case, the capable player wanted. It turned out that the only thing the hunter wanted was revenge, was that he immediately changed in the person speaking of this. The ranger was confused and did not understand what the guy had in mind when he talked about revenge. Surrounded, which the man left for no longer managed to create an alliance, waiting for the moment when the guy changes his mind. But Shen stopped Shibusha and wondered, did he allow the man to leave? And literally the next second, the ranger felt a threat impending on him. A fiery arrow entered the ground, leaving before that a hole in the player of a decent hole in the cloak. Flying on the ground with a wounded leg, a man with frightened eyes asked who attacked him. The answer was right in front of the player, and the Shone of Shenya was shooting his shooter. The man repeated that they had no need to be at enmity, and if the guy finds him, then his nickname would become Red due to the insurance of Shibusha. The ranger did not know how much Ching was an advanced player, so he asking if he knew that meaning of Red Nickelum. But the ghostly hunter never answered the question. But instead, one of the phantoms went down to the ground. A moment later, another copy joined the double, which was literally surrounded by the wounded. The guy replied that he was not doing before, and asked a counter question, asking the enemy whether he knew which people he despised. The shot player had no choice, and he, slightly stuttering, asked. Aiming at Shibusha, Ching replied that he had despised the scum most, that they had betrayed his comrades, realizing that he himself is suitable for this category of people. The ranger asked the hunter not to rush, but no prayers were able to stop the powerful attack of the 7 erection arrows. One of the players who were in Rock City came a notification of a reward of 50,000 for the head of Chao Shuvan. Other players began to discuss about the leader whose name became Red because of the murder of the character, which was part of the top 10. For others, the reward for the head of Shina was the opportunity to disrupt a large jackpot. The hunter did not like that. After the death of one of the participants in the table, the whole server knew about this, and the killer began to hunt. Jiao Chan asked the guy why he was still with her. The girl explained that the reward for the hunter's head was even a reward for the boss, and if he does not leave now, it would be too late. But despite the circumstances, Shen was not going to rush, recalling that Chan had not yet paid for work. In gratitude, the billionaire handed over 400 gold to the assistant for the assistance at the auction. The girl was immensely grateful, saying that if she works a little more, he would finally become free. The ghostly hunter was dumbfounded by such news. Because I did not know that Diao-chan was forced to work in an auctions. The guy immediately demanded that the employee of the establishment tell who forced her to work, and whether there were the same innocent sacrifices besides her. Chan replied that she knew that they all worked for the Rising Sun Company. The billionaire was speechless when he found out that the girls worked for his company. Shen wanted to find out as much as possible, but the girl said that she could not say more. Confused, Diao-chan insisted so that the ghostly hunter would not ask her any questions. The player did not talk anymore an assistant if she refused to speak for one reason or another. Suddenly, blushing from her own act, the girl kissed the savior on the cheek. After that, the guy already burst into paint, trying to find out from the companion what had just happened. The girl explained that someday she would pay Shenya for his kindness and her salvation. Observing the Aojoyan house running away, Ching thought about her boss. The first thing the player thought about was that only Xiaotian Tsai could go to such an act in the company, possibly through his henchmen, and while the guy wanted to find out this moment upon returning to the real world, other players arrived in time for him. One of the strangers who was on the elevation shot at the killer with a fireball, but those who came for the award failed to catch a ghostly hunter by surprise, especially a long attack. Turning around, Ching noticed that they really quickly came through his head. As Diao Chan said, the player was only one movement to repel the attack of the enemy, believing that a funny day awaits him. The guy's attention attracted the noise of cracking branches, which spoke of replenishment of opponents. From their shelters, a dozen characters came from that they wanted to get a decent reward behind Shenya's head. But in hunters, the guy saw only fools that they wanted to die as soon as possible. Among the crowd of racing players, the leader of the gang of green snakes, Jan Chen, suddenly appeared. But before the guy, thanks to the skill of teleportation, Ching appeared that he had already sent his arrows at him. A joyful expression instantly disappeared from the face of Chen, who did not understand what the old acquaintance threatened him from. In the Mask of the Tiger, Shen asked the head of the gang if he decided to get even with him in this way. Everything turned out to be accuracy, on the contrary, and the head of the green snakes came to the aid of his friend. Jan Chen ordered his people that they froze like idols, to call a ghostly hunter an older brother. The players, bowing to one voice, called the billionaire an older brother, which only puzzled him. The guy demanded that the leader of the detachment explain to him that he had arranged for the performance. Rising to his feet, John Chen explained that the gang of Green Snake had the task of dealing with everyone today. Then he would come close to this place. The ghostly hunter decided that something had happened to the leader of the detachment, because of which he suddenly became so bold. The commander said that he was not afraid to face the expert, because the Chao Chu Van was a real expert in the entire district. The billionaire did not expect that the leader of the gang would be so devoted to him. The player asked that the leader of the group recalled his people because he himself had to figure out the mess that he created. Jan Chen wanted to bring at least some benefit, and offered the hunter a place where he could have been hiding temporarily. But the daredevil refused, and taking the opportunity to send the Guan message to the family, the billionaire said that Chao Vana's head with a red nickname was too tough for Guan's teeth. The message that the members of the gang of Green Snakes heard them forced them to whistle in surprise. After that, the players began to sing a ghostly hunter, hoping that he would fight to the very end. Meanwhile, the guy who had so much noise secretly watched one of the thugs. The man, being ambushed, wondered if there was a reward for such a character too high. But the thoughts of a lover of light money were interrupted by his colleague in the workshop that he suddenly found himself behind him. The big man with one blow put a man that he intended to attack Shen Qing. Grimila treated the members of the Green Snake team, which he reported to his commander about the elimination of one of the villains. Following his older brother, Jan Chen reported that his people killed him around all low-ranking players. Listening to the report of his assistant, the guy at the same time watched a group of opponents. However, Shen was not even close to the enemy, following him with the help of his minions. One of the wolf's flock was not far from nothing suspecting players. Busters of their heads reported their assistants that they could not cope with the mission assigned to them. Qing asked the head of the Green Snakes that he had in mind when he said that the remaining were more experienced. The guy sincerely did not understand what he said wrong, catching the formidable gaze of the hunter on himself. The billionaire asked John Chen if he wanted to escape, since his last comrade had just killed. The head of the gang wanted to prove Shani the opposite, and whistled loudly, urging his people. But none of the gang did not appear at the call of the commander, and the couple was left alone in the middle of the forest. Chen burst into tears, expressing sincere regrets to his elder brother, which could not cope with the task. Confused, the guy asked the ghostly hunter what they had now to do, who suddenly whistled. The head of the Green Snakes was surprised where such a large flock of wolves suddenly came from. The player was already preparing to attack animals, because he did not know that they were not their enemies. Shen ordered the assistant to stop, which caused Jan Chen not any surprise. Bowing, the hunter began to feel one of the wolves, explaining that he called them for reconnaissance. The player enviously noticed that Qing had an entire army at his disposal. The billionaire assured that the wolf cubs were not so strong, though they had excellent data collection skills. The ghostly hunter received information from his wards, having learned the number of bustle hunters. Of the 76 people, there were only 2 left, which caused doubt in the head of the Green Snakes. The guy wondered who could put so many players, because his people were not capable of this. Shen made clarity, explaining that his phantoms were responsible for the elimination of these characters. The most powerful shots of the 7-star arrow, one of the doubles destroyed players from the air. The second clone was wielding on the ground, dealing with the enemy to handing, which was weaker. The phantoms of the ghostly hunter napalm burned everyone who wanted to enrich themselves on his death. The leader of the Green Snakes was saddened that all his people died in this way during the operation. Shen advised Chen to concentrate on training, because if the guy gives slack, he would drag the whole team down at a critical moment. The guy's conversation was interrupted by a stranger that there was one of the 2 remaining players. A man with a girl said that it was difficult to find a player because many people stood on his defense. Having met with the next bait lovers, the billionaire immediately scanned them. In front of the hunter was a ranger, nicknamed the Cruel King, and a Callinger of Haiji. King was not surprised that the couple survived, since their characters were 8th and 10th. The hunter decided to send his assistant to demonstrate what he was capable of. The billionaire assured that if Chen fight these players, he would rise in the table. Without confidence in his voice, the head of the Green Snakes nevertheless agreed to join the duel. The Cruel King was curious whose arrows would be faster, his or Shenya. The assistant billionaire ordered strangers to stand, but his request sounded not very convincing. The calling officer immediately determined that the player was a real expert behind, that he first sent his minister. The ranger did not approve of such tactics, stating that as soon as he dealt with the pawn, he would take it for a coward. The ghostly hunter did not answer, but did not take his gaze from his opponents. But the words of the cruel king touched the head of the gang, which claimed that the couple had a high opinion of himself. The leader of the Green Snakes decided to teach a jump lesson, and a bullet headed in their direction. Before the guy had time to get to the enemies, he suddenly squeezed a clot of blood out of himself. The player was squeezed by a giant stone hand that appeared from the portal under his feet. Hiji, with the help of a call technique, attacked the guy with a shadow giant, forcing him to shut up for a while. The girl squeezed the stone fingers more and more, but the leader of the Green Snakes did not give up. Jian Chen reincarnated in a furious giant, freed from a stone trap. The player in the body of the monster wanted to strike a ranger, but the man at that very moment left the attack. The partner of the cruel king again involved the technique of calling as a defense. The giant hit the stone wall, which suddenly arose between him and the callingman. Jian Chen was shocked that his strongest attack did not work on a stone monster. The shadow giant called up Haji, again gathered together defending his mistress. The girl kindly explained that her giant had a strong armor, thanks to which he was good both in defense and in the attack. The ghostly hunter became interested in the power of the shadows, which was possessed by one of the opponents. The guy admired the girl's amazing ability, completely absorbed in the battle. The player asked the opinion of the cruel king that he, being behind him, thought about this. The ranger did not understand how the enemy managed to notice him, since he used epic skills for teleportation. Shen outwitted the enemy, behind which there were two phantoms he called up. The clones of the billionaire without much effort laid the arrogant player on the ground. Without turning to his enemy, Qing told him not to even think about trying to escape. The guy added that he would deal with him as soon as the performance ends with the participation of their partners. Suddenly, like an earthquake, the trembling of the earth began from the collision of two giants. Both large warriors left behind clubs of dust when they moved the battle from the ground into the air. The leader of the Green Snakes was amazed at which monster managed to make a callist. The stone monster pushed the berserker away from him, which flew away with a cry. However, Jian Chen landed in the best way, making a moat in the ground with his face. Rising to his feet, the player could not believe that he was able to lose in force against the stone giant. The next second, the enemy mentioned by the guy was already opposite him, preventing him from resting. The shadow giant brought down his blow to the berserker, but at the last moment he managed to get away from the attack. The commander of the Green Snakes was grateful to his speed, but conceived, did not notice the next attack of his opponent. The stone big man suddenly grabbed the assistant Shaney, using the moment when he lost his vigilance. Chen repeated that his opponent played not according to the rules, that he held out his hand to him underground. Haiji was curious why the minister risked his life for the expert. The girl offered to join forces and divide among themselves a reward for the head of a ghostly hunter. The player did not understand how such a thought occurred to the callingman, that he had adhered to his principles and was not going to betray his older brother. Haiji sighed heavily, having received a refusal, but was not going to let the guy go so easily that she decided to confront her. As a punishment, she decided to send Berserk to the Renaissance Point. The shadow giant, still not releasing the enemy and growing another hand, was preparing for the final blow. As soon as the stone giant slapped his hands on Jian Chen, he formed an explosion with a huge shockwave. Bitterly battered, but not defeated, the guy squeezed out a barely audible sigh. The impact forces were enough for the effect of Berserker Chen to finish his action. "I am approaching the fallen guy." The callingman noticed that he was on the last outburst, but the girl did not finish the head of the Green Snakes, so that he saw with his own eyes how she would turn out with Qing. Suddenly the girl stopped, unable to move on, but did it not of her own free will. The assistant Shenya, flattened on earth, tried to detain Haiji, ordering her not to move. The shadow giant, having dealt with the commander of the Green Snakes, switched to the main goal. But even after the giant power demonstrated, the ghostly hunter did not change in his face. On the contrary, the corners of his lips raised in a smile that he literally laughed into the eyes of death. The callingman for such a player's behavior with a red nickname only began to annoy more strongly. Then the girl took an anger at Jian Chen, which was nearby, dogging him with all his might. The guy collapsed straight at the feet of the shadow giant that he again turned his eyes to the assistant Shaney. The girl, with a crazy look, ordered her toy to destroy the last of the gang of Green Snakes. The giant began to stretch out a stone hand to grab a helpless opponent. All shaking with fear, the player already mentally said goodbye to his character, anticipating his death. Suddenly, the giant pierced a powerful shot, which left a hole in his body in a huge size. Not believing his happiness, the guy turned to look at the person who saved his life. Haiji all turned pale when she found that someone managed to break through the armor of her giant. The girl wondered who their opponent was, that with one blow he defeated the shadow giant. The billionaire, suddenly being behind the girl, asked her not to ask stupid questions. Shen explained that he did not like when someone rudely treated his subordinates. The speech of a ghostly hunter touched the leader of the green snakes to the core that he was moved and failed to restrain his tears. The calling man repeated her question, claiming that the guy could not possess such a force with his level. She was going to invest money for the hunter's head in the foundation of her own guild. Haiji said that she had very little left before the accomplishment of her goal. And while the girl spoke teeth to the enemy, a large swamp formed under him. The calling officer stated that no matter how much the player was, he was not to hide from the shadow swamp, which could exhaust the enemy in a matter of seconds. Looking at how quickly he received damage, Shen recognized this trap impressive. But leaving the swamp added that it was not very surprised than shocked its enemy. Putting an arrow in the bow, the guy asked if the girl had any more trump cards in the sleeve. Haiji lost the speech of the speech that she was negatively heading her head. From the memoirs, Qing knew that Haiji was the strongest guild, and Xiao Tiancai quickly raised his level as he aimed at her. The hunter gave the girl the right to choose, or she agrees to his conditions, or he will return her to the revival point. Without hesitation for a second, the calling man chose the first option in order to create her own guild. The player released the enemy, saying that he would transfer the money later, and her guild was supposed to be called a linger. Although she survived, Haiji doubted that the guy would hold back his word. The girl disappeared, and the ghostly hunter gave his assistant recovery potion. The guy drained the flask handed to him with one big throat, as if he was tormented by thirst. After that, Jan Chen deftly got to his feet with a statement that he was again full of strength and energy, having cured the latter from the gang of green snakes. The Shen ordered him to return and finish what he had begun. The player pointed to the cruel king, explaining that Chen had to deal with him. The guy's face broke in an ominous smile that he intended to recoup on the ranger in full. A man with frightened eyes looked at the assistant hunter that he had already approached him. Bowing over his headhunter, Jan Chen asked if he had behaved inappropriately for an hour. The leader of the green snakes asked the ranger to remember that he never tried to kill his older brother. Looking at the clot of energy in front of his face, the cruel king asked not to do this. After Jan Chen rose in the player's table, Shenya was disconnected from the server, which he did not notice how 15 hours passed. The guy finished with the main preparations, and tomorrow he intended to go to Roy City. Flalling in the game module, the billionaire thought about the way to drag his sister into the game, thereby increasing the pumping of the level. But if the tone cannot be connected to the game process, the player had a spare option. He considered the possibility of increasing the level with the girl that he worked in the Anaject house. The guy decided that he would not curl up to you with this, as there were several other tasks in priority. The billionaire called one of his employees, asking him to come to him to discuss an important issue. A man walked loudly along the corridor of the hospital in the expensive shoes polished to the shine. The employee, having come to the head of the boss, knocked on the door jamb. Having received permission to enter, Chen dressed from a needle went into the room, on the neck of which a tattoo was packed, and a scar passed through his nose flaunted on his face. Looking out the window of Qing, asked to find information about the illegal affairs of subordinates Xiao Tiancai. The man replied that he would be happy to take up the assigned task, rejoicing that the boss did not crush his injury. The young billionaire did not answer the compliment of the subordinate, only silently glancing at him. Having stepped up, Chen said that he would immediately go to collect the necessary information. Shenqing quietly said that the actions he had taken were only the beginning. While the most terrible thing was expected by the traitor, Tianu was still ahead. The next day, the sister of a wealthy player asked him what he was going to do. Having changed into the costume, Qing replied that he was just going to meet with the council of the company. Over a second, the tone was near the guy. She hugged him and shouted that her purposeful brother had returned. But the girl was sad when she remembered that from the moment of the accident, the council was appointed head of Shao Kut Tsai. However, the guy already knew that the friend who betrayed him bribed the council of council Uncle Chi along with Amber. Shen asked his sister not to worry, assuring her that he would simply show everyone that he was alive and felt great. The billionaire wanted the advice to make it clear who the last word in the company will be. The tone looked thoughtfully at her brother with her big, understanding eyes. The main office of the company was already discussed with the council of a recent project. The acting head, Xiao Tiancai, asked the company's participants who was for and who was against. The gray-haired Kui paired with the red-haired Embar raised their hands in favor of a decision. One by one, members of the council began to support the decision of colleagues, showing their consent. Tiancai was glad that Uncle Qi and Amber managed to convince the group, announcing everyone about the launch of the project next week. But only one of the employees did not raise his hand. which he declared the temporary manager of the company. The head of the council apologized for not noticing Hai's uncle sitting in the corner. The man explained that the project would destroy the reputation of the company, not to mention possible risks, going against Mr. Shini's strategy. Xiao tried to explain that the project could bring a lot of money, and Mr. Shini's strategy was already pretty outdated. Sensing the taste of power, the guy proposed two options for the development of events, one of which was the support of the project, and the second is the dismissal of Hai. The man, getting up from the table, demanded a deputy company not to raise his voice. Amber made a remark to his colleague, asking him to calm down and begin to behave like adults. The man asked to follow the rules, and if most of the votes had no objections, then the project was approved. However, there was another person who expressed an objection to the adoption of the project. Uncle Q and Amber, in surprise, had already jumped from their seats when they saw a protester. Uncle Hai, who was supported by the current head of the company, could also not believe his eyes. Hiding his excitement, Xiao Tianxi carefully asked what Mr. Shen was doing here. The billionaire appeared at the meeting, accompanied by his sister, asking if he could not appear in his company. Having retreated, the deputy noticed that the leader had recovered, the return of which everyone had been waiting for so long. Amber said that health should be in the first place, and the discussion of such small projects did not require Qing's personal presence. The guy, on the contrary, repeated that he was getting better and he missed his employees, and decided to give his voice for the abolition of the project. Uncle Qi wanted to answer the head of the company, but Amber stopped him in time. A gray-haired man gazed his colleague with a frowning gaze for not allowing him to carry out the plan. The red-haired one, only nodding his head, made it clear that there was no time, and there was no place to solve such issues. Xiao Tianxi repeated that they had no choice but to submit to Mr. Shini's desire. Although the deputy spoke in a calm tone, his hands clenched into fists, which immediately cowardly from anger. Qing turned to Tianxi, assuring him that he trusted his gaze, but noticed that the project was contrary to his strategy. The billionaire notified all those present that sometimes he would visit them with a check, after which he hastened to leave. As soon as the head of the company left, Amber turned to the angry Tianxi. With a predatory look, the man ran a finger near the neck, making it clear that it was time to get rid of Shenya. The guy understood everything without words that was given a green light to use extreme measures. Later, Tianxi asked himself where the crippled came from, that he had violated all plans with his presence. Amber stated that they had little time left. If they wanted to take everything from Shini, then it was necessary to act hard. The man continued that the next step of Xiao would be difficult to take, because Chen Lon established guards around the house and the hospital. The guy was convinced that someday he would be able to defeat Shenya. But now he was able to do only one thing. Tianxi was of the opinion that Qing, to a like-minded person, should have closed his mouth forever. Uncle Hai, hiding at that time from the rain, rode in a car controlled by his personal driver. An employee of the company did not even suspect that in the car, people who were slaughtered by Tiantianu were rode in the car opposite. Having caught up with the Hai car, the killer exposed his gun and began to aim. But at the same moment, the guy himself got a bullet in his head, never having had time to make a shot. The shooter turned out to be the driver of Hai that he had saved his boss from imminent death. Despite the fact that the killer was eliminated, the shutter of another pistol was struck. The driver that was a partner of the deceased criminal decided to finish the case he had begun. The personal driver of his Uncle Hai, with a quick look, checked the situation. On the other hand, right on them, without reducing speed, a truck raced, ready to collide with a car. The driver of the truck was also one of the members of the gang, which was hired by Xiao Tianxi. The driver asked his boss to stay as strong as possible, meanwhile pulling the gearbox. From under the wheels of the high car that overtook the criminal's car, sparks in all directions were poured opposite. The truck driver, watching the trick of the driver, gave the word that he would not let him escape. Turning to the truck side, the personal driver of Hai stuck his hand with a gun in an open window. After a moment, a bullet released by a man pierced the windshield of a truck, meeting with his driver. Having lost not only management, but also life, the truck driver crashed into a car with the remaining killer that was driving. Uncle Hai thanked Xiao Chen for saving him from the ordered chaos of the mercenaries. The man, taking off his mask, claimed that it was not necessary to thank him, but Mr. Shini, that he instructed to pick up a member of the council. The company's employee was beside himself from rage, dreaming of getting to Xiao and talk to him like a man. Meanwhile, returning to the game module, Qing received the long-awaited messages that Uncle Hai was safe. Now, a billionaire with a calm soul could return back to the divine path. As soon as the guy returned to the game, the system announced a high level of danger in Roy City. Shenya began to annoy those who came up endlessly warning from the game. The hunter turned to check the changes that had occurred in the city from his last visit. As the billionaire expected, after the incident, the gates of Roy City were sealed for him. Fortunately, Sen was in charge of information about what ways it was possible to get into the city. The first method included a bypass of Roy City, where a couple of dozens of trolls could meet in a small aisle for players. Another option included the main branch of the plot, in which it was necessary to help the general cope with the demon attack that attacked the city every night. With a successful passage of Qing, they could invite to the city as his new guard. Also, the guy could open a hidden map of the demon nest, with which you can get the gold equipment of the demon line. The ghostly hunter decided to get uniforms first, and after increasing his level, the system notified the player that all the skills of evolution graduated from their reloading. Thanks to the skill, Shen could improve the bronze ring to diamond quality, increasing the gap among themselves and other characters of the game. A ghostly hunter called for a click of fingers to improve the subject of 3 phantoms. One of the doubles of the billionaire applied evolution to the ring, but the ring did not react in any way. The guy put forward the theory that the Ring of Greed did not have intermediate levels, and perhaps because of this, it ceased to react after evolution. Despite this, Shen told his subordinates to continue to influence the ring with the help of the skill. The player touched the updated subject, which has not yet reached his final form. The guy caught himself thinking that if he continues to improve his quality, he would lose a lot, because the city was a very dangerous place. But the idea that he would no longer need resources did not give a rest hunter. The billionaire decided to try luck, and ordered his subordinates to continue evolution. In the end result, a Ring of Greed of diamond quality was born, which increased the chance of dropping objects by 100%. Qing did not regret that he dared to take a chance, because now he could receive from the 30-level monsters gold quality items. Now, all that the player remained was to wait for the night to meet the demons. But as soon as 12 was breaking through, no one showed up near the gates of the city. Very little time passed before the situation changed, and from afar, the monsters began to approach Roy City. The attention of the ghostly hunter attracted the noise to himself, coming at the gate themselves. Shen finally waited for the moment when the city opened the gate, which meant the beginning of stripping. The general came out on the battlefield, from behind which the gigantic handle of his sword was visible. The valiant warrior ordered his army to prepare for the upcoming battle. One of the crowd of demons approached the distance close to the city. The demon was huge, combining several parts of various monsters at once, after which a smaller monster came. Having scanning the demons, Shen determined that the largest of them was the 30th level, while everyone else was only the 20th. Having taken out his giant sword from the back, the general ordered his people to attack his people in order to protect Roy City at all costs. The leader of the detachment was the first to rush into the battle, swinging his weapons at the leader of the pack of demons. For the first time, Shen saw the NPC so randomly fought, hoping that the defense would be able to survive. All that the hunter needed was to wait for the right moment and, having inflicting a critical blow to the boss to pick up the whole reward, with a heavy sword, the brave general continued to resist the hordes of monsters. Clutching the leader of the demons, a giant shockwave went from the blow of a warrior and monster. From the mouth of the monster, a cloud of light began to break through, which was a harbinger of the future attack. The warrior, although he was alert, did not run away from the threat impending on him. A ray of energy burst from one mouth of the demon that hit his enemy directly in the face. The general, even after the frontal attack, the demon managed to survive without moving a meter. A warrior with a charred part of his face looked at the demon with reddened eyes, showering him with curses. Having dropped his sword, a man with his bare hands attacked the enemy, knocking him down. But at the last moment, the demon returned his balance and stood on his feet firmly. The general could not believe that after all the damage caused to the enemy, he still survived. The main demon slapped the warrior with a strong slap in the face that, unlike his attack, the NPC fell to the ground. The general's army fought against the monsters drew attention to the fact that their commander fell. Shen, watching the defense tolerates, he found that the current script did not coincide with the one that was in a previous life. The ghostly hunter, fearing that the path he had chosen was dear to defeat, decided to intervene. By clicking his fingers, the guy called on the phantom to prevent the general from perishing, because he was important for further events of the plot. A sewer arrow released by a double flew straight at the leader of the demons. The monster easily blocked the attack, hiding from the arrow of a mutated palm. The two-headed demon was surprised when Qing was right in front of his opponent, that he used the phantom as a distracting maneuver. The guy was eager to find out if the monster could recapture his blow from a close distance. The powerful attack, Shen interrupted the body of the leader of the demons in two, separating his hand from the body. The general was surprised at who the mysterious stranger was, that he managed to defeat a 30th monster with one blow. The ghostly hunter took the pathos stance, without looking back at how the main demon was breaking into pieces behind him. The player decided to inflict a control blow to the enemy's army, calling for the help of his assistants. The general, fascinated by the defeat of the demons, did not notice Qing's doubles that they attacked the enemy with fiery arrows. As soon as the arrows reached their goal, they created a giant explosion that hit opponents from the eyes. The battlefield was dotted with burnt corpses of monsters, not leaving a single survivor from them. The defender of Roy City immediately turned to the player that he alone killed all the demons, handing him the assigned reward. Taking the casket from the general, the hunter wondered what could be inside such a small box. As soon as Qing opened the casket, the reward shining with a gold light made him smile in the whole mouth. Sheeny got the heart of a warrior, an object that was able to transfer attributes from the game to the real world.